Okay, good.
We don't have everybody yet, but we have quorum.
Yeah, well. My little MiFi is not behaving well this morning, so. Oh, if I disappear, you'll know why. Okay. It is 9:30, so we will start. I don't know of any regrets, but some people may not be in Zoom yet, in the meeting room. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and start. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 2 to 12 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council, which will be on January 27th, please email or call the committee coordinator, Ms. Melody Duffany. We're going to, I have a very small introduction to this year to read, but we'll go through the consent agenda first. So, any declarations of interest? None? Confirmation of minutes from the December 11th meeting, 2020.
Carried.
Carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, the first item, we have a someone that just signed up this morning, Alex Cullen, to speak, so I'm going to hold that item. The next item is 33 Maple Grove Road. We have several speakers. That's in Councillor Hughes' ward. Will be holding that. Item number 3 is zoning bylaw amendment 1155 Joseph Sear Street and 1082 Searville Road in Councillor Tierney's ward. I have no speakers in opposition. I do have the applicant here to speak if need be. So does anyone have any questions on this item? Not seeing any. So to Miss Nisha and team of Roberto Campos, Shelley Percy, and Emily Coyle, do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item?
No, we don't.
Okay, perfect. So on the item of 1155 Joseph Sear Street and 1082 Searville Road, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Next item is zoning bylaw amendment, part of 1620 Maple Grove Road in Stittsville. We have no speakers in opposition. The applicant is here if need be to speak. And I see, Nico, that you are there. Does anyone have any questions on a different Maple Grove, but the one in Stittsville, the application there? I see none. Nico, if we're prepared to carry this, do you still need to speak?
No, we don't, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So on the item of part of 1620 Maple Grove Road, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Next up is the zoning bylaw amendment, 1258 Morange Street in Orleans. Councillor Lulof's area. We don't have anyone speaking in opposition. We do have the applicant here if necessary. Does anyone have any questions on 1258 Morange Street? Councillor Lulof, you want to say something? I see that your hand is up.
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, very, very pleased to see
new rentals in my area. We've been desperately wanting for rentals of this type in Orleans for a long time. So I would encourage the committee to please support this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's a great location. So does anyone else have any questions? I see none. So Taylor, West, and Murray Chown are here. Do you still need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Is this item carried, everyone?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a speaker on the zoning bylaw amendment, 300 Mawate private. So we will hold that item. The next item up is zoning bylaw amendment, 243 and 245 Hinchy Avenue. We don't have any speakers in opposition. We do have Paul Robinson here on representing the applicant. Does anyone have any questions on 243 and 245 Hinchy Avenue?
Chair, may I just ask, Paul, can you please give me a call with respect to the garbage that needs to be sorted out before we can approve the site plan, but otherwise, no questions, Chair.
Thank you. So seeing no other questions, Paul, do you still need to speak if, there you are, if we're prepared to carry this item? And of course, you heard what Councillor Leeper just said. Yes?
I'm fine. I will. I'm fine.
Perfect.
you.
So on the item 243 and 245 Hinchy Avenue zoning bylaw amendment, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is zoning bylaw amendment, 114 Isabella Street. No one speaking in opposition. We do have Taylor West and Murray Chown still here for this item. Anyone have any questions? Oh, Councillor Bernard. So do we need to hold this, Councillor Bernard?
No, not at all, Madam Chair. Just wanted to thank JC Renault, the city side of this, and working with Murray Chown on this one. It's a good development, and this area is going to be redeveloping quite a lot, that Isabella Chamberlain corridor. So appreciate the work on this one. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Does anyone else have anything to say on 114 Isabella Street? I'm not seeing anything. So Taylor and Murray, if we're prepared to carry this, do you still need to speak?
No, we don't, Madam Chair.
Okay, so is the item carried? Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Next item up, I do have a motion that Vice Chair Gower is going to move on this one. We had an unfortunate but entirely possible issue. We do have somebody to speak to the motion if necessary. It's a motion to defer to the February 11th meeting. Vice Chair Gower?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a motion to defer where staff became aware on January 12th of an error in the notification list for stakeholders in respect of today's public hearing for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 847 Woodruff Avenue. And whereas one of the affected stakeholders has indicated that he did not receive notice of this meeting until January 11 and has requested to be given the full allotted 10 days of notice to prepare for participation in the public hearing. Therefore, be it resolved that the report be deferred to the February 11th, 2021 Planning Committee meeting.
Thank you. So is Mr. Archibald here?
I don't actually see him at the moment.
Okay,
One
well,
second. Sorry. Yeah, no, I don't.
I see that Jack Sterling is here. Jack, do you need to speak to the deferral? Okay. All right, so on deferral, carried.
Carried.
Thank you very much. The next item up, I have no speakers speaking against this one. It's zoning bylaw amendment, part of 54 Springbrook Drive in Stittsville. We do have the applicant is represented by Jack Sterling and Bernie Ash. Bernie is the board member. Today he's wearing the hat of board member of Amberwood Village Recreation Association. Does anyone have any questions on this one?
Can I make a very quick comment, Chair?
Sure, go ahead, Vice Chair.
I do support this this report and hope our colleagues will do the same. But I wanted to thank the leadership of the Amberwood community for the work that they've done on this file. And it's part of a broader plan to create a sustainable financial plan for the Amberwood Golf Course, which is a very important amenity in our community. So thank you to everyone who's been involved on this project.
Thank you. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Ash, do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item at part of 54 Springbrook Drive? Your mic is off, Jack.
No, Madam Chairman.
Okay, perfect. So on this item in Stittsville, zoning bylaw amendment, part of 54 Springbrook Drive is carried. Carried.
Carrie,
All right. Next item is in Councillor McKenney's ward, and it's zoning bylaw amendment 390 and 394 Bank Street. We have no one speaking in opposition, which, after having heard about it, read about it, and seen the comments from Councillor McKenney, I'm not surprised. We do have the applicant here represented. Does anyone have any questions on this item? No? Jamie Posen and Roland Rom Koltoff and Karsten Liesenberg. The architects are here. If we're prepared to carry this item, do you still wish to speak?
Do not need to speak, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jamie. So on this item at 390 and 394 Bank Street, zoning bylaw amendment, is it carried? Carried?
Carrie,
Thank you. The next item is 114 Richmond Road in Kitchissippi, temporary zoning bylaw amendment. We have no one speaking at all. All right, does anyone have any questions on this temporary zoning bylaw amendment? I don't see any. So on the item, is it carried? Carried, thank you.
Carried.
The last item up, we do have a motion that I'm going to ask. We do have 3 speakers. They are all in support, so they're representing the applicant. We do have a motion that Vice Chair Gower is going to move on behalf of Councillor Deans, who's here. Hi, Diane. Do you want to introduce the motion, please? Vice Chair Gower.
yes, I can. So moving this on behalf of Councillor Deans, that Planning Committee recommend that Council sustain the development charge complaint in respect of 1325 Johnston Road and direct that the municipal development charges paid be reimbursed.
Thank you. Councillor Deans, did you want to say anything?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak and you, Councillor Gower, for moving this motion on my behalf. As the ward councillor for this application, I've been working closely with Mr. Donnelly and his team on this file since late summer. The application the Donnelly Group put forward is for a 4,000 square foot expansion to their collision center in order to increase their capacity. I have met with Mr. Donnelly and have had the opportunity to discuss this application in greater detail as well as gain a better understanding of the nature of the work that is done at this location. And I agree with them that the non-industrial charge does not fit with what is being proposed. Unlike traditional automotive repair shops, there is no retail component to this location, and the work being performed is not sold on site. More than 98% of the business is contractual with insurance or fleet companies as opposed to from the general public. The majority of comparative applications that were assigned a non-industrial classification included locations that have a retail component, accept work from the general public, or perform more routine maintenance such as oil changes, tire changes, and glass repair. In my opinion, the nature of the work being performed in this location meets the definition of the industrial classification as outlined in the DC bylaw, and the DC charges applied should reflect this use. As a result, I am supportive of the Donnelly's complaint and agree that staff should reclassify this application as industrial and apply the appropriate fees for this classification. Madam Chair, I certainly understand that the closest category that staff could find was automotive repair, but that really is a different use. It makes a significant difference in terms of the cost to the applicant. And I think right now, especially during these COVID times, when businesses across our city are struggling, we should err on the side of our businesses. So I'd ask the committee members to agree with this motion and change this classification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Leeper has his hand up, and I should have just held this item. I thought it would be, is this going to be?
I would suggest holding it. Yep, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to hold that item. And I'm going back, let's see, back to the beginning. So Happy New Year to you all. I hope you found some rest over the holidays. I mean, if you were doing as we've been told and staying at home and doing all the things that we are doing to try and get that curve back in shape again, then you probably did get some rest. With our first planning committee of the year, just I don't know why it says this. Oh, somebody wrote this and I'm reading it and I'm going, it doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not saying it. I thought I would send a short summary of some of the items on the agenda. I plan to introduce the meeting with a few words about the major policy files. And we're actually, what I've got is the wrong speaking notes. So I'm just going to say the biggest thing we have on our plate this year is the official plan on January 25th, 26th, and 28th. We're going to have, and longer if we need it, but that will be the urban boundary recommendations following the work that we did earlier last year on the official plan. And so I encourage you all to put that in your calendar if you haven't already. I know that Ms. Duffin is prepared to start signing up people once they have read the report or seen the report. And so the year is going to, we're going to have a couple of other larger files. Shadow Laurier will be coming back. And, it's never boring at the every 2 weeks committee meeting. So a lot of work to be done, a lot of policy to be done, and we'll start into it right now. We're going to go to item number 1, which is being held. I do have a motion from Vice Chair Gower on this, but I wanted to let you know, and this is the framework for adopting a community benefits charge bylaw to replace current Section 37 policies. There's a lot of interest, of course, amongst all of us in our communities. Mr. Willis, this is his report that he's, as our GM, he is playing a very much a leadership role, and he has to leave the meeting because, of course, there's a lot of work to be done on COVID and the new rules from the province and understanding what they are. So Steve, I'm going to ask you, are you there, Steve? Is he there?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
So before I ask Alex Cullen to speak, would you like to introduce this and then feel free to leave?
Thanks, Chair. I will be here for a few minutes. I have to be at the emergency operations meeting at 10, so I'm happy to answer any questions and certainly answer any questions any councilors at any point in this process. What this report is a roadmap to bring forward a new community benefits bylaw, which replaces the Section 37 system, which will expire very soon because the province has repealed that as part of the legislation or replace it with this new program. And the community benefits bylaw means that the city will have the ability to impose a charge for growth-related needs of the city on buildings that are over 10 units in size and over 5 stories in size. It actually has to be both. So as the report explains, that doesn't actually happen that often in the city. It's I want to be frank with council, this will not be a big revenue generator for the city, but it is an opportunity to raise some funds for improvements in areas of high growth. And I think, it is our advice that we do explore using this, and what the report in front of you is a roadmap on how we will create that new bylaw and get advice from the community about what areas we should invest in with the funds, and also seek input from the development community who would be impacted by this as well. We've also included some strategic cautions to council, including how this will interplay with inclusionary zoning, and because council has expressed that that is an extremely high priority, that we bring forward that. So we, the report is not a decision report, the report is a process report. And finally, we've asked for a council sponsors group, and we've recommended that the chair, Councillors Leeper and Tierney, who represent the areas who are getting some of the most new activity in the last little while. We took a look at who's actually had those larger buildings actually popping up, and recommend, just as a bit of a cross section, to get a bit of advice into the process. So, but with that, Chair, delegation has an opportunity to speak, and I'm here to answer any questions, as are Garrett Schrom from Legal Services and Gary Baker, who works in our department, who handles all our development charges related work. And Charmaine Forgy is also available on any consultation related questions.
Okay, I thank you very much, Mr. Willis. I see two hands waving right now, and you have to leave in 5 minutes, and now I have 3. So I think I'm going to, of the 3 people who have their hands up, do you all have a question for Mr. Willis?
I do.
Okay. Councillor Fleury, I can't see you from my participant list, or where are you?
Hi, Jan. My question is, yeah, it could be answered from another planning staff.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
Perfect. Then I'm going to just, Councillor Brockington, is your question for Mr. Willis, or is it, can it be handled by someone else?
His very capable staff can answer my questions.
Perfect.
Same with
you, Councillor Menard. So Councillor Leeper, do you need to speak to Mr. Willis?
Can I just ask Mr. Willis, both Councillor McKenney and I, probably others, have been able to use Section 37 as a contribution towards the capital cost of affordable housing. We've seen some projects move ahead as a result of Section 37 benefits money that we've put into our funds. The proposed process doesn't speak to consultation with housing advocates. It speaks to consultation with the Federation of Citizens Associations. How can we make sure that our housing sector and some of those advocates are part of the process?
Chair, just quickly in response, we're absolutely open to having a meeting with a representative group of that, and if the councillors who have a relationship with them which would like to convene a meeting will certainly show up to help explain the process and how this will work and how it will interplay with inclusionary zoning as that process.
Thanks. The process outlines what I assume is going to be an ongoing dialogue with the industry, and I'd be seeking to see some sort of ongoing dialogue with some of our civil society groups other than just FCA. But that's kind of the commitment that I was looking for. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Willis, good luck.
Yeah, no, Chair, actually, Ms. Duclos will cover for me for a few minutes. I'll wait for the conclusion of Mr. Cullen's remarks.
Then,
Karina's buying me some time in the other meeting, so I'll stay for a few more minutes because I know this is important.
okay, so we're going to go right to Alex Cullen. Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, my name is Alex Cullen, and I'm president of the Federation of Citizens Associations, the FCA. Members of Planning Committee should know that for the last year, we completed our 50th year of existence, growing from 28 members in 1970 to 55 today. The FCA has been following the provincial initiative regarding the development of a community benefit framework. The province is interested in cutting red tape to facilitate development. The FCA is interested in ensuring that established communities have a say in how this benefit will impact their neighborhoods. We're not talking about small developments here. The threshold starts at 5 stories, 10 units and up. Obviously, we can anticipate larger proposals beyond current zoning if this policy were to be in place. The benefit has to make sense to the local community in order for this to work. The local community, has to have a say in this process. And then there is the definition of a community benefit. A citywide benefit, such as a sports stadium or an aquarium, shouldn't be considered as a community benefit, as the impacts of such large-scale development would significantly impact a local neighborhood. Such large-scale proposals would need a different treatment. We are concerned that the community benefit framework may be used to accommodate greater density in order to facilitate community amenities that should be built as of right, such as community centers. We believe growth should pay for growth, and the community benefit should not be used as a substitute for this. Another example is the issue of parkland dedication, which has been recently removed by provincial legislation that created this new benefit. As you add more development in an area, there has to be an accommodating increase in supportive infrastructure, such as parks. We don't have a good measure of how much park space is required for a certain number of housing units in a neighborhood. We need to see this developed and considered as part of this policy. We are looking forward to participating in the consultation process that the city has outlined in this report. We thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. This is how I have captured the people that signed on early. Councillor Leeper, Councillor Brockington, who has committee members, then Councillor Fleury, Councillor Menard, and Councillor King. Of all of you, and I'm going to hold that order, so don't worry that you'll lose your place. Does anybody have any questions for Alex Cullen, Mr. Cullen, of the people that I just mentioned? No? No? Okay, thank you, Alex. Thanks for coming out. And congratulations to FCA.
Thank you.
So Councillor Leeper, you're no longer on the list. Thank you. And so I'm going to go to Councillor Brockington and then Fleury, Menard, and King. So Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and everyone. Mr. Willis, part 3 of the motion says that we approve that section 37 continue to be applied until the adoption of our new bylaw or the regulatory end date, which is September 2022. If we are able to draw greater benefit from the existing framework, why would we want to switch to our new bylaw sooner than September 2022?
Chair, Councillor Brockington raises a really good point, and this is part of the work plan is a cost benefit analysis where we're actually going to look at this. To be frank, I think if we talk to some of the councillors who've been involved in Section 37 negotiations, I think no one's particularly satisfied that Section 37 is actually doing a lot of good for us right now. So I find it, I don't believe one tool or the other will be the be all and end all of everything we try to accomplish in terms of paying for the amenities related to growth. So we will look at that in detail because you raise a very, very valid point. And we will time our recommendation based on further analysis.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from speaking with my colleagues at AMO when this was being contemplated was municipalities were not championing the elimination of cash in lieu, a significant redefine of Section 37 and then the parkland, because we think at the end of the day, there's going to be a net loss to what municipalities are able to get out of these types of arrangements. So as the delegate said, the province initiated this to eliminate red tape and they thought it would create savings, which would build more affordable housing. That's still to be debated. I don't believe that's going to generate any significant uptake in new units, but really we have to be able to defend what we're getting out of it now and make sure that if there are changes, we're still going to get benefit for our communities. And so I appreciate the sponsors group. I'm glad this is coming back. But the caution I have is if we're getting more now than what we're going to get out of when we have a new bylaw, and I do support creating a bylaw, I think that's definitely the way to go, then I want to see it implemented as late as possible, like going right to September.
So Chair, if I could clarify something, just a factual position, and Mr. Schromm from Legal Services will back me up and add more detail onto this. So just recall when the province initially proposed the legislation, they were going to remove cash in lieu of parking, and council opposed that and actually went so far as to direct the chair of planning, Chair Harder, to appear as a deputation to the Provincial Standing Committee hearing the legislation. And so I accompanied the chair and we presented the city's position in opposition. And the province backed down on removing parkland dedication. We still have parkland dedication. But the only thing that has changed is really the section 37 as it existed before. But I still, your point is still valid. I just want to set the record straight on that one issue, but the point is valid. We will look very carefully about what the benefit is. And Mr. Schramm, I don't know if you would like to add to what I said.
No, nothing further to add. Madam Chair, that's correct. The parkland dedication remains a tool that we have, and that's a change that was resulting from the latest round of statutory amendments.
But will that be funded through revenues generated via this bylaw?
So Chair, cash in lieu will continue to operate after the 2 years, much exactly as it does today. There is no change, and unless council chooses to change its own policy about how we apply it, it's the same as you see today. The community benefits charge will be a flat rate charge, much like a development charge. It'll be so many $1,000 per unit or whatever the number is. And I don't want to give anybody any projections to the number just because I made one up out of the top of my head. It will be a per unit basis, flat rate charge applying to only those larger buildings. And as our analysis in this report means, it's not going to apply to a lot of development that occurs in Ottawa. It'll be a very small subsection of it.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed, I just wanted to let you know that I have a late breaking request here since we started. And it's on item 6, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for 300 Mawate private, to defer this item until, is it the next meeting, Ms. Stephanie?
I was not informed to which meeting.
Okay. Is Mr. Mark here?
Yes.
What do you suggest as, leaving it open-ended?
Madam Chair, given that the next meeting is devoted to growth management, I would recommend that it be deferred to the February 11th meeting. I would further recommend that the no notice provision in 3417 also be part of the motion.
No further notice.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Right. Okay, so this will be the second item that's moving to that February 11th meeting. And we'll just deal with this right now. Vice Chair Gower, are you moving that?
I can certainly move it. What's the reason for deferral?
Well, I'm seeing a flurry of activity between planners, super area managers, and also Paul Black from FOCHEN for the applicant. Let me see.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
There's a discussion there's a discussion that has arisen over one of the performance standards that needs review by staff and no doubt consultation with the ward council.
Okay, that's it. You're moving it?
I will move for deferral on that item until February 11th.
And no further notice.
Chair, we did have a delegation registered, Peter Stockdale, but I don't see him in the list.
Right. Well, okay. So anyways, on deferral of 300 Mawate private to February 11th. Carried?
Carried.
All right, thanks. Okay, sorry. We'll go back to this, and our next person with question is Councillor Fleury, followed by Councillor Menard and Councillor Ralston.
Good morning,
Councillor
Madam Chair, and thank you for the time and clarity. Wanted to jump in and ask a number of questions. So I'm interested in that group, and I hope that the work is fruitful. Mr. Willis or whomever is able to respond, I am not a professional on planning, and I've learned some ropes along the way as it relates to cash in lieu of parkland, as it relates to Section 37, now the CBA elements. I'm happy to see that review underway, but is it possible to develop for council and community members a bit of a brief on those various tools that are able to be used through an application review as they've continued to evolve?
The councillor makes a good point, and actually in the work plan attached to the report, that was actually one of the first tasks we were going to do, is to create some communication tools to explain how this relates to development charges, how it relates to parkland, cash and lieu parkland dedication requirements. So we agree.
Okay, thank you. And my second question relates to the consideration of what is growth. And I recognize we're a growing city. I get that. I've sort of tripped up in my specific area where when I came to office, there were a number of approvals that were already in place for a lot of the towers that you see along Rideau Street. And they came into be when there was a waiver of DC charges. And then at some point in time, I believe it was in maybe Jan remembers, but it was in 2013 or just around there, the DC started to kick back in. And then when I speak to planning staff and others, they don't see the area as growth yet. There's a number of units that have increased. So I'm looking for just a little more clarity on what planning perceives as growth, and maybe this is not the right venue. If not, who I should be speaking to and how to get some clarity there.
So, Chair, this is untested legislation. I'm sure the first municipality, which will probably be Toronto, that passes their bylaw will probably end up before LPAT having that very discussion. And we're working very closely with, we've created an intermunicipal working group with a lot of major cities in Ontario. And we're actually comparing notes and sharing information back and forth so we see how we go. If you think about it in relationship to development charges, which is similar in its approach, there are two types of things that the city may wish to do. One is we may wish to increase the capacity of a facility or something, or capital works that we have to accommodate more people in the area. That would be considered growth. If the city wished to improve the service that's in an area just so you have better quality service, that is not necessarily growth, because it is a change in level of service. So it has to be clearly related to the fact that the population in an area is growing and that you're providing an equal level of service to the new increased population growth. And in areas that are actually growing through intensification, that's not that hard to demonstrate, because we can show the number of new units being built in an area. But we can't, for example, use it in an area that's not intensifying to say improve the offerings of equipment or availability of services in those areas, because it's not related to growth. So the test will always have to be related back to, are we growing in this area or not?
Okay, thank you. Is there someone from your team, Mr. Willis, that I could continue the conversation on this element?
Mr. Baker is my day-to-day expert on anything development charges related, and is absolutely becoming an expert in how we work into this bylaw. Mr. Schrom from Legal Services is also available to assist you if you want a more legal interpretation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Willis.
Thanks, Councillor Fleury. Next up is Councillor Menard, then Councillor Ralston, and then Councillor Dudas.
Thanks very much.
Menard?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I wanted to thank you personally, as well as city staff, on the advocacy that you did to the province around several things, the services that are going to be maintained under the DC charges within the CBC. That's a good one. The parkland dedication, the current parkland dedication, and the cash in lieu process that'll continue as a result of that advocacy. And then, I mean, some of the other pieces around the transition period for when this can be implemented, I think those are very positive changes that the city staff and yourself advocated on. And I was happy to see the province change course on those. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I had a few questions on this. The CBC cap, it says in any particular case shall not exceed 4% of the value of the land. And I'm just wondering how that will work. Is it the 4% that's calculated as what the land and the building will be developed into, so what the eventual end state will be? Or is it the land value prior to development that'll take into account?
So the rule the province set, and this is not the city's rule, this is the province's rule, is that you calculate the value of the land the day before the building permit was drawn. So it is the pre-development value of the land effectively that will come into effect.
Okay, so if there's an empty vacant lot not worth very much money, that will be the assessment, not the new building that'll go up there, 4%. Okay, so
That's
that'll
correct.
okay, that'll really reduce, I imagine, the potential there. And you mentioned in the report a little bit, but how is this going to work in conjunction with the inclusionary zoning bylaw we are expecting? What will be the interplay between this and that bylaw?
So, and I'll also go back to the comment Councillor Leeper raised on this related to the housing issue. Just remember that we can still collect for affordable housing in the traditional development charges bylaw. We will have the inclusionary zoning bylaw, should council adopt it, that will set a minimum number of affordable housing units that need to be part of a development. It'll be a standard for minimum component of that. And development charge, community benefits charge will apply to only the, inclusionary zoning, the province is limited to that into the areas around transit stations. It's the only areas you're allowed to apply it to. And then community benefits bylaw will really effectively only be allowed to be applied to tall buildings, which in Ottawa's plan tend to be the same area around that inclusionary zoning will apply, which is around transit stations. So one of the tensions in this report is if we go too far and put too many of these charges on, we'll actually create a disincentive for anything to be built around transit stations, and therefore we won't meet our intensification targets. And ergo, we're going to end up looking for more urban land in the future because we're not meeting our intensification targets. So it's an incredibly delicate balance of competing interests around here. We need to be really careful on how we calibrate these things together. And I don't have an answer today of what that looks like. I'm just cautioning council that this is actually going to be complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And just from my read of it, that's a similar take that I was anticipating. So I just appreciate that dialogue. You mentioned in the report as well that after the enactment of the community benefits charge bylaw, or September 18th, 2020, whichever is earlier, municipalities can no longer enact new density bonusing bylaws. So I just want to clarify, does that mean that once we enact the new CBC bylaw, we're not going to be able to amend it moving forward, or that we just can't introduce a new CBC bylaw in the future if we fail to do so in the timeline provided?
So I'm actually going to ask Mr. Schrum to answer that question because it is a nuance in the legislation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. It will be the case that we won't be able to enact new, what we've been calling Section 37 agreements. So the old Section 37 process where we would get a community benefit in exchange for increased height and density, those types of agreements and the bylaws that support them, zoning bylaw amendments, would no longer be possible either September 2022 or when we enact the community benefits charge bylaw, whichever comes first.
Okay.
So that's a to be noted, and that's what was previously discussed as well with Councillor Brockington, that it's a consideration that we're going to take into account in the process of looking at this. I'd also, just to your earlier question, Councillor, note that the valuation date is the date before the building permit is issued. That would ordinarily include any zoning bylaw amendments that ordinarily have been done prior to that. So there would be some consideration of the development potential for the property the day before the building permit in the valuation. However, there wouldn't be a completed structure on the property prior to building permit.
Okay,
so it's just something to keep in mind.
No, that's very helpful. Actually, the zoning change that may have come prior to would likely be included in that.
That appraisal, yeah, would account for that. Correct.
Okay. And then my last question, and I'll just have a brief comment. The capital costs of facilities, services, and matters required because of development or redevelop in the area to which the bylaw applies is what we're going to be charging CBCs for. And so I'm just wondering, just to get clarity on that, what can be counted as required? So does affordable housing, park improvements, transportation, public realm, traffic calming, are all of those required, or what's the determination of how the bylaw applies in a particular area? I assume it's similar to the DCs, but
yeah, it's actually in many ways, Chair. Council raises an interesting question. We are going to explore this through the project. The community benefits legislation is actually more broad than the development charges legislation. It actually gives you more latitude as council to charge it, as long as you're not charging for something that you could raise money for in one of the other tools. You can't double dip, and you can't use the wrong tool to raise money for it. And it has to be related to growth. That's the key test, is it actually has to be related to growth. So for example, if development charges are often, depending on the category, limited based on historic levels of service, you could use the community benefits bylaw to go further than the historic levels of service, provided you're not double dipping to the charge you have in the development charges. So those are the again, we're working with the other municipalities. It's brand new legislation. We're working through how this is going to play out, and we'll have more information as we get further into the project.
Okay, and my last comment, just Madam Chair, before I end, I think to Councillor Brockington's point, it would be helpful to know, and it's hard to know this, I guess, now, but what we're assuming will be the case in terms of the difference of funds coming into the municipality as a result of this change. Are we going to be looking at better off, the same, worse off, depending on how this works out? It would be good to get some analysis on that for where we're at. And to Councillor Leeper's point about adding in more voices, I think we've got GOBA, BOMA, and the FCA currently in the report. It'd be nice to add somebody like Acorn, or people that are going to be living in these units. So it would be good to add others to that consultation. So just leave with those comments. Thanks.
Thank you. We have, so Mr. Willis, if you need to leave whenever you need to leave. Councillor Judas has said she's on the list. Next is Councillor Ralston King, then Councillor Judas, then Councillor Kavanaugh. So you leave when you need to.
Actually, Chair, I think I will, and again, I'll put the offer up, because this is a process report. Councillors anyone can call me at any time for further clarification. Mr. Schrum, Mr. Baker are on the line as well, and absolutely can answer questions about the elements. And if it relates to process and consultation, then certainly as well.
And where, just one question before you leave. When is this coming back to committee? Is it September or it's June? It's this year though, for sure.
No, Chair, we actually haven't put a firm deadline on this yet, because we are still waiting for certain matters to be clarified by the province, and we do have a consultation process. We put a 24-step process in the back of this report that we intend to follow, and I think it will take much of this year to do. This would be later in the year if I was betting, subject to what we hear from some of the other municipalities as well.
Okay, so we do have.
I can't be clearer about this, but I would think it's in the last quarter of this year.
That's okay. Just my point was that there's, as this evolves, there's going to be time for other questions and to meet with you if need be. Thank you very much for your time today. Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and Happy New Year to everybody, to staff and to my colleagues, if I haven't been able to express that to you yet. In terms of this item, I do want to also echo the sentiments of Councillor Menard and Councillor Leeper. It will be important, if there is consultation, that we do engage with wider civil society groups. So I am looking forward to that. And in that vein, I'm also wondering, and this is a question to staff, how the city will ensure that expenditures of community benefit charge funds will be spent on projects that benefit equity-seeking groups that have traditionally been less involved or disenfranchised by the land use and development process. So that's a question to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can respond. We certainly can take into account that comment from Councillor King about considering equity-seeking groups and their interest in the course of establishing this process. It's going to be it's very much in the works, so I think it's something we should take into account in the process. And Mr. Baker and myself are here. We'll be part of that, and we can bring that forward with the group as well.
Well, I do appreciate that. The report indicates that the idea is to hire a consultant to develop strategy. And I would definitely would like especially in my capacity as counselor liaison for anti-racism and ethnocultural initiatives, to really see a strategy that's developed that ensures that there is an equity focus that is taken into account when we are considering the development of this bylaw. And I hope that staff would be amenable to obviously looping in the new anti-racism secretariat, and maybe on a wider scale, the Gender and Race Equity, Inclusion, Indigenous Relations and Social Development Service, the new service that has been developed for policy inputs when they undertake the consultation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will certainly include yourself and our other departments for their advice on how best to move forward with the policy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Dudas?
Thank you, Chair. Some of my questions have already been asked, but I was, I guess, a little perplexed because when I was reading the report, it indicated that under the current Section 37, sometimes the cost of negotiations between the city and the resources and the time, it actually meant that the city wasn't reaping the full benefits of Section 37. In some cases, it was costing us more or about the same. So I'm just wondering, how will that issue be addressed when you're developing this new bylaw, so that we're not seeing that we're putting out more expenditures and not reaping the full benefits of this bylaw?
Madam Chair, I'll take a first stab, and maybe Mr. Baker would like to jump in as well. I would note that one possibly positive thing, and obviously this will be studied more, like Mr. Willis said, we're going to be looking at the cost benefits of implementing this and ways that we can reduce the costs of administering the program. But one of the benefits of the new community benefits charge regime is that it is more like a development charge, where there's a flat amount per unit that would be applied. So a big part of the cost that comes from Section 37 agreements is that you have to negotiate a new agreement with specific terms for each development that comes in. So that does involve a lot of staff time. There will be a lot of upfront time, however, for the community benefits charge to do a full community benefits charge strategy, which is kind of like a development charge background study. So we do have to do a full report that's studying the need for growth-related community benefits. So that's all to say that we're going to be looking at this carefully in the process that we're proposing under this report. I wonder if Mr. Baker has anything else to add.
Yeah, I think I echo Garrett's comments that it's more, it's less site specific. It's more of a global type of approach. One of the things or items that I think potentially could be challenged is the value of the land. So when the land value is established, it doesn't mean that the proponent agrees with that value. They can challenge it, and there's a criteria that you have to go through. There's a sequence of events that have to occur. So hopefully we won't experience that particular dilemma. But there is a point in time where if they don't agree with the value that the city has put on the land and to apply the CBC, that can be challenged, and there's there's certain timeframes that have to be followed in order to meet those that disagreement and that criteria. So that could cause some issues going forward, potentially.
So I'll look forward to see how that's handled. It sounds like it's a bit of a sticky wicket in terms of trying to figure out how to make sure the city gets the most out of this. I was curious too that, once again, the bylaw, once it comes into place, once you've developed it, once we've approved it, we've moved on to that, it can be appealed. So my question to you, if that overlaps that September 20, 2022 date where Section 37 will no longer be in place, is the city still able to collect CBCs for the duration of the appeal? Or are we collecting nothing for anything? Does Section 37 not apply? We don't have CBCs. Where would we be at in terms of that for collecting financials?
I'll respond just because anecdotally from my experience with development charges, we're appealed on development charges almost every 5 years that we update. So we continue to collect development charges until that appeal is settled at LPAT. So in 2014, for example, we had an appeal on roads that wasn't settled until May of 2017. So it took 2.5 years, and we ended up refunding $18 million worth of development charges. But we continued to collect development charges until the appeal was resolved at LPAT. One other thing, what's interesting is as well is that initially there wasn't an appeal process, and that was added in as part of the changes that the evolution of this particular charge. So initially there was no appeal to LPAT, but that was added in through the process. So, but you can I assume you can continue to collect it, and once it's resolved one way or another, the only I think it's similar to development charges. You won't be able to increase, but it'll be whether one or the other values, I guess, is accepted. I assume that would be the basis for the appeal, or whether it's growth related or not.
Okay.
And I can just confirm as well that sorry, Councillor, I can just confirm what Mr. Baker said, that the appeal process doesn't prevent us from collecting the community benefits charge. If the appellant is successful, we refund the amount that they paid.
Okay, and my final question is, I understand that there was a dollar figure put to hiring a consultant. I think it's 100,000. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. What are we exactly getting out of that? So are they going, because, Garrett, you mentioned early on that there'll be some expenditures for other aspects for city staff. Is it just public consultation? I'd just like to know what we're getting out of that money.
I'll let Mr. Baker answer, because I think he would have the most detail there.
Yeah, I think as it was alluded to by Mr. Willis, that it's more to do with the coming up with it's similar to the development charges background study. So we hire a consultant to help us come up with the projections for growth, right? So that it's very similar. They've outlined it, or they've used the same sort of methodology. So which areas would the charge be applicable to? I'm not saying it's not going to be easy, because a lot of these are site specific, right? As opposed to development charge, where you're looking at growth throughout the city or inside Greenbelt or whatever. But they would hopefully work with staff and identify areas where potentially the CBC could be applied, and come up with a methodology on what projects potentially could be applicable, whether it's area specific or citywide, things like this that they would help assist us with. Plus, they have the expertise, because they're dealing with, there's really only 2 consulting firms involved, so they would also be involved or working with other municipalities, so they would bring that expertise with that best practice to us, and help us hopefully get a bylaw that's can sustain an potential appeal to the LPAT.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas. Councillor Kavanagh, and then Councillor Leaper's back on the list. And that's all that I see here. So if anyone else wants to ask a question, please raise your hand at this point. Thank you. So Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to staff, because they did meet with me to walk me through this a bit. It's Bay Ward are going to be affected because we're going to see a lot of stage 2 LRT. So it's very tough. What was broken that had to be fixed when they were putting this forward? And staff were giving me that Toronto apparently was the target of this, not necessarily us. Was that the case, Mr. Baker?
Yes, yes, if you looked at the initial changes that were introduced back in May of 2019, a lot of it was related to cash in lieu of parkland and the Section 37 agreements that were in place in Toronto, and that's why I think again Mr. Willis alluded to that they're talking tens of millions of dollars as opposed to other municipalities, so they're quite unique, and I believe there was a desire for more transparency in the process, and thus the CBC was introduced to provide some sort of transparency and a strategy rather than having, I think sometimes Section 37 is more ad hoc, and they wanted something more that they could follow in a process that could be understood and established clearly, and which projects were I guess the other area was that to make sure that growth development charges weren't overlapping with Section 37 or vice versa.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. It's not a one size fits all. And I'm glad that we're working with our equivalent cities, as Councillor Brockington pointed out on this, and it's kind of concerning. And the cap, it's now is at 4% of the land, but it had been at it was at 15 at one time. Is there any chance that it could change again? Like, can it be argued that that is not adequate?
I can respond to that, Madam Chair. That's correct. The cap used to be proposed at 15%. The cap was reduced to 4% along with the current changes. However, it should be noted that the scope of what was covered under the community benefits charge was also reduced substantially in terms of the fact that it now only applies to mid and high rise buildings that are residential and multi-use. So it remains to be seen whether the reduction is proportionate to the reduction in the cap is proportionate to the reduction in the scope of the charge, and whether we're going to see that the cap in Ottawa is substantially restricting our ability to get 100% of what we're seeking in terms of the community benefits charge. That certainly would be something that's studied as well.
Yeah, thank you. And my concern too is lots like brownfields where we really want to develop them, and the land value will be devalued, and therefore we won't get much. So it's going to hurt us, even though development would be a good thing if we can, clean up those areas and move forward. Has that been looked at, or is that going to be looked at?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a good point. I hadn't considered how that will interact. The valuation date will be just before the date building permit is issued. So if there was still environmental contamination existing on the site, that could theoretically impact the valuation of the property, and therefore the cap that would be applied, thus limiting our ability. So I think we'd have to think about that further. I like I said, I haven't turned my mind to it before this, but it's a good question to consider going forward.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleague, Councillor King, and Councillor Menard about suggestions of consulting with equity-seeking groups. Of course, gender equity is important, and as is all equity, and I appreciate those comments. That was very helpful. One of the things that I found, I'm only just getting started in the development world of negotiating with developers, and it does feel like you're at a marketplace, going back and forth on what you're going to get for your community benefit. I think that is one positive thing, is having some stability in it, having some ratio that makes sense for a building. My only big experience is 100 Bayshore, and we were able to get a lot, but I don't know what we potentially could get, because there was no markers. There's no framework right now. We were able to have affordable housing, 45 units, as well as getting a skateboard park. And so I felt pretty good about it, but I feel like I was on Kijiji or something, and I'm trying to bid on something, and did I get a good price or get a good deal? There's no markers. So I think having something like a marker is important. So that will be helpful. But my concern is, should affordable housing be something that we barter for? Isn't it something that we should be considering to put in development charges so that we're moving forward on it? Is that possible?
Yes, Council. Yeah, I mean, currently, we do collect development charges for affordable housing, and I believe they're involved right now in updating or providing a long-range financial plan for affordable housing. So they're examining various options, one of which is development charges to maybe to expand the role of development charges is playing in funding affordable housing units. But that I believe that long-range financial plan analysis is ongoing, and so they're working on that situation right now. Plus, I think as like I said, we're one of the municipalities that does exempt affordable housing units as well. So we provide that extra layer of support, not only collecting development charges, but also waiving them in so that that burden or that financial constraint isn't placed upon those particular redevelopment or development sites.
Okay. Can you just clarify to me how inclusionary zoning is going to work in with this?
I think that maybe that is quite a large discussion that maybe you could have off outside the committee. This is, going to be a process that you can be involved with for a while, as opposed to think that that's something of a more of a Mr. Willis.
Yeah, it would be a Mr. Willis question. And it is in the report that it will have impacts on it. So I think we do need a broader discussion on that. So I'm willing to take that, but I hope that I'll be able to share that because I think it's important for everyone to hear about it.
Madam Chair, I can just also echo Mr. Willis's statement as well, that it's definitely going to be considered as part of the process going forward. The interaction between inclusionary zoning, community benefits, and development charges, all of which have a component related to affordable housing. So it's definitely on the radar in terms of how it's going to interact. Both inclusionary zoning and the community benefits are fairly new, at least in Ottawa. So we're going to be having to examine the best way to make those work in conjunction.
And Charmaine is in the room here, in the Zoom room with us, and I know we can count on her to take note and follow up. Correct, Charmaine?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So our last questioner is Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. And I don't have a lot of questions. I just want to there were some comments made by some over the course of the discussion this afternoon that might lead folks to believe that we're not, the Section 37 benefits have not been helpful. I do think that this is important to get right, and I'm very thankful to staff and Chair Harder for asking me to sit on this committee. I have a long history with Section 37 benefits for many years now. I've got water in parks to help flood puddle rinks as a result of Section 37, pedestrian infrastructure that's been built in the ward and because of Section 37. Affordable housing projects have been able to move ahead because of Section 37 top-up money. It's a regime that has real benefits. There are some significant challenges with it. I think the transparency of the drawdowns process especially is problematic, but it is important that we get this right, and I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with everybody through the course of developing the new bylaw, because I'm a proponent of Section 37 and whatever will replace it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to bring us back to the motion that Vice Chair Gower introduced. Correct. And this is really amending the council date from 1 in February to January 27th. Is this motion carried? Yes?
Carried.
Okay, and then on the recommendation of the report as amended, carried? Thank you. So now we're going to go to one that we have a lot of speakers on. This is zoning bylaw amendment 33 Maple Grove Road. And to introduce it, I'm going to go to the ward councillor, Councillor Hubley. And then we'll go to all of the registered speakers. And I just point out the fact that we've had a lot of correspondence on this item as well. And I'm sure that you've all been keeping track of it. Councillor Hughley.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce this one, which is not something I normally do at committee, but given the background on this, I think it warrants an introduction. So I'm speaking on this file today to share with you the concerns raised by residents and to share my own personal experience on this file. I want to firstly thank all of my residents who took the time to share their concerns with the committee and myself. I also want to thank Colette, the planner, and other staff members for their assistance throughout this process. And I would like to also thank the applicant for wanting to invest in our community. You can read in detail all the concerns raised by residents in their written submissions. There are individual submissions and there are also group submissions that many of the residents collaborated on. Many have submitted multiple versions, but the themes have focused around parking, height, zoning, and the end use. We heard from many residents on this file as it generated a lot of attention locally. Unfortunately, one of the methods used to get attention by a very few of the people involved was to start rumors like claiming that there was not capacity in the local sewer system, which we've verified there is capacity. Another one was that the property was owned by the city, and there was vicious personal attacks that need to be noted on staff, the applicant, members of this committee, as well as myself. All of which detracted from the real issues people here had to, all of which detracted from the real issues people had with this application, which again were height, parking, transit, and the zoning exceptions. The applicant filed their application and requested multiple exceptions. Working with staff, we made it clear that residents did not support a reduction in the parking requirement. And the applicant made the changes to what you see now, which meets our parking requirement. Locally, questions remain, is our requirement enough for a suburban community? They reworked the application to move the garbage containers inside and fixed an issue with the driveway width that was also requiring an exception. They are planting 6 trees to replace the 2 that needed to be removed. And the applicant can confirm, but I believe the ones being removed were not healthy trees either. There was a movement claimed on the height issue by the applicant, but residents are disputing that and have made allegations of deception and staff incompetence. The applicant originally requested an exception to go to 12 meters, and the resubmission has dropped that to 11.5 meters. But residents believe that that is a sleight of hand by extending the roof out over a window and changing where the measurement is taken. The additional height is a significant challenge for the impact on nearby homes. The house next door, for example, is the smallest in the immediate area. The owner shared a picture, the owner of the house next door actually shared a picture with me of his view that he currently has to the north and across this property at 33 Maple Grove. It is beautiful, there's no doubt about that. But it's going to be lost because existing homes are set significantly back from the road, whereas this new property needs to be placed closer to the front of the road. The property at 33 Maple Grove is also on a significant slope, which creates a towering effect on the existing homes behind the property. Basically, what the height issue comes down to is that the zoning in the area for the past 20 years at least allows for 11 meters of height, but nobody has built to that height. That is going to be a citywide issue for this committee as well as council that we're going to need to deal with if the lofty intensification goals of the city are to ever be met. In this case, even if the applicant only wanted to build to the allowable 11 meters, I believe that most of these residents will still object to the application. Now, there's also the transit issue. The application suggests that there is nearby transit service. Yes, there is, but it's very limited. The service is peak hour only, and it's geared towards getting you from this area to the park and ride. It's not geared towards what we look for in 15-minute neighborhoods. It can't get you to the grocer, your doctor appointment, or other local places that you may want to visit within your community. In fact, the transit service here highlights an issue in all our suburbs. Our service is not designed to move you around the burbs. It's to move you downtown and back home. Someone living here or in Stittsville, for example, will not be able to get to work in Canada, even though we want our communities to be designed to do so. This will require an investment by our city. Currently, along with other councillors and staff, we are looking at how to deliver that internal suburban transit. Before we go too far down the road of intensification in the burbs, and before any reduction in parking requirements are approved, this issue must be resolved. The other more familiar issue for the committee is the zoning. The area is R1 and the applicant wants an R4. Seems to be straightforward. We've dealt with this a lot at this committee, but they can't build what they want under the R4, so they need exceptions. When staff and I met with them, I asked that they go over the existing zones and try to pick a zoning and then meet the requirements of that zoning. For example, under R4, they can build the two 4-unit apartments, but they want to have 2 6-unit apartments. You will hear a lot about that from residents. They also want to divide the property in 2 so that they can build 2 buildings instead of 1. Building a bigger single building will trigger requirements for persons with disabilities, according to the comments received from residents. Let me be clear, even if the applicant changes his plan to build 1 building, I do not believe residents would support this application. These issues, I'm wrapping up now, Madam Chair, these issues are not unique to this application. So I've discussed with Chair Harder and Mr. Willis, both of whom have been very supportive throughout this process, and I'm thankful for their support. They understand that there is a need to address the common issues that apply to other communities as well. The use of terms like intensification and compatibility with neighbors are currently creating confusion and anxiety amongst residents. Just switching to the use of the term regeneration is not going to make that go away. We need to do better. We need to better define these terms and present them in a way someone who has never dealt with a planning file can understand how we are applying them, why we are applying them, and what does that mean to their home. I am thankful for Chair Harder and Mr. Willis for their support to take this issue on with staff in the new year. Chair, because of the unresolved community issues, I will be voting against the zoning application request because I am here to represent my residents. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hubley. Because we have so much interest in this item, I have asked that a presentation be readied by the planner, Colette Gorney. Ms. Duffany, do you have that? So if we could have that presentation, please. Erin, I see you there. Are you doing the presentation, Erin?
No, Colette will be, Madam Chair, leading the committee through the presentation, but I'm absolutely here if for any questions along with Colette.
Okay, thank you. So let's have that presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Colette Gorney, and I was the planner on the zoning bylaw amendment application at 33 Maple Grove Road. Next slide. The property is located at 33 Maple Grove Road. In the southeast corner of the intersection of Maple Grove Road and McCurdy Drive. The property has a total area of approximately 1,600 square meters with frontage on 2 streets, and it's opposite the Hazeldeed Maple Grove Clark Cemetery and Rudy Shankman Hospice Facility along McCurdy Drive. Next slide. So this is just a slide showing what the site looks like now. So there's currently one single detached dwelling on the property. It fronts onto Maple Grove Road. As you can see, there's a bus stop located along McCurdy Drive and a pretty significant retaining wall at the rear of the current site. Next slide. So the proposals for 2 3-story apartment buildings containing 6 units each. A total of 16 parking spaces are being provided on site, which equals 8 per building, and 3 parking spaces per building have been tucked into the site, as you can see, and are to be screened by garage doors. So the site is designated as general urban area in the official plan, and this designation permits the development of a full range and choice of housing types to meet the needs of all ages, incomes, and life circumstances in combination with employment, shopping, parks, institutional uses, etc. And so the OP is directing growth and intensification to areas where it can be accommodated in a compact form and be efficient from a servicing point of view, which is desirable because it reduces travel, makes transit more desirable in these areas, reduces land consumption, and maximizes the use of existing infrastructure. And this will also be, this is a sentiment also reflected in the forthcoming new OP, which is directing growth to Ottawa's existing built-up areas. Next slide. Okay, so to do this, the applicant has requested a residential 4th density zone, and through the development review process, the R4J subzone has been identified as the most reflective of the proposal and most appropriate for the site. Next slide. And so there will also be an urban exception included in the R4J subzone. And so this will deal with the aspects that are bolded on the slide that you can see. So they've asked for a reduction or an increase in the maximum permitted height and the maximum number of units, as well as some changes to setbacks and to allow a portion of a parking spot to encroach into one of the setbacks in order to allow for more parking on the site. And they've also requested relief to permit 2 dormers to project above the permitted height limit. So some revisions, as already mentioned in his introduction, the height has been reduced from 12 to 11.5 meters. 1 additional parking space has been provided per building. A pinch point in the parking area was removed to meet the aisle width requirements. Garage doors have been added to screen the covered parking spaces, and bicycle parking has been increased from 6 to 12 spaces, and waste and recycling storage has been moved to inside the building. So pretty much what is proposed here is better design and offers more in terms of setbacks and compatibility than what would be permitted under the existing zoning. Following a severance application, 2 single detached dwellings of similar height and mass could be developed as of right under the current zoning on the site. So overall, staff are satisfied that the proposed development complies with official plan policies, including accommodating the needs of a range of people and respecting the community's established characteristics. The development responds to relevant urban design and compatibility criteria in the official plan, and we don't anticipate any substantive undue adverse impacts on neighboring properties. This is the type of development that the new OP calls for and staff recommends in both suburban and downtown areas. Therefore, the department is recommending the zoning bylaw amendment be approved. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Colette. So we will now go to our delegations. Starting with Melanie Gallant. Now, I'll just tell everybody, I haven't had occasion to say this at this meeting before this opportunity, but everyone has 5 minutes to speak, and as a maximum. So Melanie Gallant, you're the first one up, followed by John Gallant and Jake Cole following John. Melanie?
Chair, neither Melanie nor John seem to be on right now.
Okay, so we'll hang, I'll call them back. I think I saw Jake Cole, however.
Yes.
Okay, Jake, you're up first. And again, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, I can't see myself there. I assume you can see me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
We can't see you though.
maybe you're on a different screen.
Ah, sorry.
That's okay. It's not your fault. Melody, do you know, can
There
you
I am.
actually?
I'm in sort of shrouded in
Oh,
darkness.
I see you. You're on my second screen, but I'm using an iPad. So, all right. Well, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. And I must say off the top that I've lived in Ottawa for some 43 years, right in the community where I live now, close by this application. And Ottawa is a great place to live. And I guess it's thanks to people like you who are working behind the scenes to make it that way. So thank you for what you do. You've made the city a pretty nice one to live in.
Thank you.
A couple of comments and a couple of observations that I'd like to make, and a rather simple solution if I could offer that for the committee to consider. First of all, I've lived here for 43 years, as I said. I do things around Ottawa to try to make it a better place. I happen to be leading a project in Ottawa to measure air pollution in all the city's wards, and discovering that there are a few hot spots around that some of you as councillors should be aware of, and trying to try to clean up the air a little bit. My observations, first of all, the intensification policy itself that the city is involved in, it certainly does have merit, and it is vague on some details that I think it should be more clear on. It does seem to imply that whatever the new intensified dwellings are going to be like, that they fit within the existing community, and that compatibility seems to be an item for perhaps dissension here, and certainly at least merits discussion. It seems to me if we're going to decide who does decide whether something is compatible with the existing neighborhood, the neighbors should be the prime audience to make that decision, I would say. And the people who are represented here in the rest of this meeting, I think, are going to tell you about how they feel that perhaps the dwelling that being proposed is not compatible with what the rest of the neighborhood is like. And I think they have a voice that needs to be heard. And they've also offered what seems to me a very good compromise solution. I'm talking about these citizens here who have some concerns, and I think you need to take that offer, which allows the developer to make a very nice, tidy return on his investment, and to provide a dwelling that people can live with and feel very good about. One thing about these meetings where developers and residents seem to come in conflict, from what I've noticed, the few that I've been following, that the developers seem to have the upper hand, and that often when residents want a certain thing and developers want something else, the final decision seems to always go in favor of the developers. I don't know why that is exactly. I do point out, and I think you're well aware of this, that developers, or at least people who work with or own development companies, can contribute to councillors' campaigns. And some of you are on this committee, I know, have received donations from people who work with or own development companies. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm not sure. I'm not trying to comment on that, but the perception is that there could be some conflict of interest when that is the case. And I know some of you on the committee have received donations from such people.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
As I said, you have 5 minutes, and I would suggest that we get back to why we should not be supporting the staff recommendation.
Well, I just wanted to say that developers, in my view, should be treated worse than residents. Simply said, that's my final line, is that I think developers are, again, the developer here is possibly could build what the residents want and leave both people happy. I think you should go along with that decision. And I'd like to think that you could bear and take into account very seriously what the rest of the residents have to say about this opportunity, and so that we all can go home happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hang on a second. I'm just going to see if we have any questions. No, we don't. So I'm going to ask again to see whether Melanie and or John Gallant are here, or Gallant. No? Okay, we'll go with our next speaker who registered, and that is Brad Hall. There you are, Brad. You have 5 minutes, sir, whenever you're ready.
All right, you can hear me all right?
Yes, we can, loudly and clearly.
Good. Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm here to express my disappointment with the staff's recommendation to endorse the development and zoning changes presented and to tell you why this committee should reject it. I believe the recommendation for approval comes from a disingenuous submission by the developer, a staff bias to the city's policy which favors the developer and ignores context, and a lack of neighborhood knowledge. I'm hoping that you think fairly about my submission and think clearly about how approvals of similar, apparently minor development will create dissension if proposed in your own words. This dissension was clearly forecast by Councillor Leeper on 2 occasions in 2019, when he said that the actual process of building infill continues to be one that needs to be reined in, and that this is an issue that's coming to your ward soon. My basic problem with the development is mass and height. The developer has portrayed this as 2 3-story apartments facing McCurdy, as does the staff recommendation. But, and it's a big but, the 2 buildings are 4 stories plus roof when viewed from the rear and side. This is due to the slope of the lot in question north from McCurdy to Young's Pond Court. The impact on neighbors in the area is thus significantly more than portrayed or stated in the documents before you. To be clear, notwithstanding the technical niceties, you are not being asked to approve 2 3-story buildings, but rather 2 4-story buildings, despite the constant referral to 3 in the developer's proposal and the staff report. When queried, the staff response is that the size of the building relates to the building's frontage, which is 3 stories along McCurdy. I and others have made attempts from the developer and the city to provide the necessary illustrations to make this disparity clear to this committee, but the developer has not done so, and the city's rules state that this is not a requirement. This strongly suggests that these additional illustrations have not been provided for the same reason they've been requested. That is, they would clearly show to a layperson the difference of the impact between the talked about 3-story buildings and the actual 4-story buildings plus roof, which have been endorsed. Now, context and logic must be a part of any process. The report before you dismisses the comments received about other existing and planned dwellings in the surrounding area. But the fact is that an observer can stand at the intersection of McCurdy and Maple Grove, look down the long hill, and see within 2 kilometers thousands of new multi-type housing units being built or being proposed, appropriately zoned, and all of which presumably conform to the 15-minute neighborhood model. The idea that these developments are irrelevant to what is planned so close by might seem a proper response to a rules-based bureaucrat, but has no basis in logic. I also object to the justification provided in the submission regarding access to public transport. The distances indicated in the submission are more as the crow flies, rather than accurate depictions of walking or biking distance. The area's one-dimensional map included in the developer's submission disguises the Maple Grove Hill, which runs at a significant distance and slope to the Terry Fox Transit Corridor. This slope inhibits anyone in a wheelchair, with a walker, or someone of any age in winter negotiating that slope easily to Terry Fox. This location encourages car use rather than use of public transport. I and others who object to this are not anti-development. We're happy to see suitable development, and that's why I've made a reasonable counter-proposal and stated we were open to other possibilities which respect the zoning change, but without permitting further exemptions. We've had no reaction to this but silence from the developer.
1 minute.
On the city sign affixed to the property, it states, "Let us know what you think." Well, I and a very significant number of others, as well as the community association, will or have told you clearly through various means that we object. We've let you know. Are you listening? Please don't allow yourselves to be manipulated by this developer or handcuffed by a policy. The city's aim of increased density for infill or redevelopment at this location can be achieved by an intelligent application of policy, considering less objectionable and intrusive options within a zoning change which does not include additional exemptions. This rezoning and building project, as it now stands, should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but thank you very much for your presentation. Next up is Matt Brewery. Matt is the Vice President of the Katimavik Hazeldean Community Association. Matt, let me see if I can see you. Oh, there you are. Hi, Matt. You have 5 minutes, sir. Whenever you're ready. Your mic is off. You're gonna have to, you'll put your mic on. We can't hear you. Your microphone is turned off. No, we cannot hear you. Okay. What does that say?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay, we'll come back. Okay. Okay, now David Weiss. David, you're here, and is Susan Weiss here?
No, it's just David who is present to speak. Susan's at work at the moment, so she cannot participate.
Well, I'm just going by the way what it says here. So thank you very much, sir, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. And good morning to the Planning Committee. And Susan and I have lived at 2 Youngs Pond Court for 27 years. So that's backs directly onto the subject property. We have been supportive of changes in our neighborhood that have been good for the community. And this includes when the subject property was developed as a group home. So we supported that. We also supported the development of the hospice in the area. But when we're looking at this rezoning application, we do not see it as good for the community, and we do not support it, and we ask that you do not support it as well. Simply put, the apartment plan for the property is an overdevelopment, too dense, too tall to fit into the 2-story residential, 1-story hospice in the community. City planners recommend an exemption to be added to the zoning to permit 6 units per apartment to facilitate the desired 3-story structure. The city has defined for low rise a 4-unit per apartment. I see this exemption as a change in the definition of low rise and should be addressed by the Planning Committee in that regard. So look at it as a true zoning as opposed to a bunch of exemptions. The second major concern is with respect to stormwater ponds on the property. By the site plan that was attached to the planning documentations does not show these ponds. It is in the text, but not in the site plan that you were given. The report does not address the lack of sewers or the safety concerns associated with open water during storms, and as well a private lot that would impact on the seepage, because it's the same area where there'd be snow plowing and salt and sand, and this would then cause problems to the existing surrounding vegetation. So we recommend that the city require the applicant to install stormwater sewers on Maple Grove Road. In this section, there is no stormwater sewers, but when you deal with other new construction developers, you often negotiate or request that the developer install them. So adding stormwater ponds in a residential community on specific property as opposed to in a community in general, I have not seen that anywhere before. So in short, our expectation is that the Planning Committee will embrace the existing rules that are in place and not permit extensions to those. And we ask that you reject this application. lastly, I thank you for this opportunity to speak on this important matter, and have a great day.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Councillor Hubley has a question for you. Councillor Hubley?
Just a comment for Mr. Wise. Thank you for being here today. Your question on the storm water pond is one of concern for myself as well. So I'm expecting answers on that from both the applicant and staff when they speak after all the presentations. So if you're able to hang on afterwards, you will get answers to that question. Okay? Thank you, Madam Chair and Councillor Hubley.
Thank you. Mr. Brewery, are you?
I hope you can now hear me.
Yeah.
I've dialed in my phone.
Can.
Good.
Yes, we
Well,
can.
thank you. I had said some many great pleasantries before finding out, but I'll say them again, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me. And
We lost you again. Where did you go? I don't even see him on the screen now. We've entirely lost him, right?
No, I see him now in the attendee. Matt, do you hear us?
I apologize for the technical difficulties. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to cut to the chase here, but thank you, councillors, for the time today, and I do apologize for the technical issues. Madam Chair, thank you for having the opportunity. You know, as some of the community members have said, and as some will continue to say after me, the redevelopment of the R1 zoning from a single family home, we are all understanding it's in need of an upgrade. It's a large lot. There's an opportunity here to meet some of the intensification goals and infill that's a priority for this committee. I am optimistic that you'll see that by approving this development, it will represent more of cramming a square peg into a round hole. Many of the residents in Katimavik-Hazeldean have been engaged on this file with over 250 submissions and 150 households advocating against this proposal. Other residents today have shared some of their insights and some facts. My hope is that you'll relate this development back to each of you in a simple analogy. I personally am a fan of the Big Mac, and I hope you'll entertain my burger analogy. I like to go to McDonald's, and I know that McDonald's has custom packaging for their Big Macs. Now, from time to time, I like to change it up, add some pickles, and don't knock it until you try it. You know, at the end of the day, we know that what's in front of us today is an R4F zoning change with a severance and a laundry list of exceptions. I believe there's seven mentioned in document 2 that came from the city planners. Now, if I went to McDonald's and I ordered my Big Mac and I said, not only do I want pickles, but I want an extra bun, an extra patty, some cheese, more lettuce, more onions, it's likely that the pre-made box would not fit. And one might question whether I'm still ordering a Big Mac or whether it should be called something else. I think in turn, we can use this analogy to reference that the 2 extra units per building may call into question whether we can still call this an R4 zoning, R4F. Lastly, our community is in support of redevelopment. We understand the goals is to increase the density. And this lot has opportunity. Turning a single family home into 12 apartment units is more than double, triple, or even 8 times the intensification. It's over 1,000%, which seems excessive. In closing, what we ask is that you consider what the true best use of this property would be with respect to the surroundings. I loved the screen that Colette shared with the aerial view. It gave me a great sense of the neighborhood. What you would see in 1,000 feet in each direction was single family homes. And by cramming 2 6-unit buildings into this lot would definitely be a square peg in a round hole. And for this, I thank you for your time and do hope that you will consider rejecting the application.
Thank you, Matt. I do have Councillor Brockington has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, sir, for your presentation and your work with the association. You acknowledge it's a large lot. It's 0.4 acres. You're opposing the current application. What is, in your mind, a reasonable development for this, what you call larger lot?
You know, I am not, Mr. Brockington, a planning expert, and I haven't spent a lot of time in development. But What I would propose when I look at the map is it looks to me that it would be about 4 single-family homes, potentially 6 townhomes. And even if under the current request that it would be severed to 2 parcels and have 2 apartment buildings that were 4 units each, which would be inclusive of the current zoning, I think that would even be more appetizing than the number of exceptions that are being requested to this file. So, you know, it does come with some concerns as expressed by the councillor. The stormwater management, I think, is a larger concern than is being discussed. We also have parking, and you know, pride of ownership is something that I take very valuable down to heart. And when I drive around Katimavik, we've had some great opportunity to have some community engagement with Christmas light decorating contests and Halloween contests, trying to navigate the COVID times like everyone else. And what I've seen is a lot of individuals taking a lot of pride of ownership because these are all owned or rented single family units. And what my concern with is cramming this many units into this space. What would the potential risks be of disassociation to the interest of the community? I would also question, you know, as was said by Councillor Hubley, the ability for people to go get milk at 9 o'clock at night requires a car. And so if I'm a couple or a family that has a couple of kids or one child, you know, there could be upwards of 36 residents living on this one space. And how would each of them navigate that? If it's just 1 car per family, then maybe it is sufficient with a couple of visitor spots. But my suspicion would be that in this neighborhood, we already have the hospice right across the street, which does create some parking conflict as it is. You know, more often than not, we're going to see a duplication of parking needs for each of the units. And I would say, you know, if there's adequate parking for the number of residents that would be realistically anticipated, it may be a better use of the property. So to answer your question in short, Mr. Brockington, something that conforms with the zoning changes that might be being requested.
Thank you for your presentation today. Thank you.
Councillor Leeper, do you have a question for Mr. Brary?
I do, thanks. I'm just wondering, I wanted to take a look at this pride of ownership issue. With respect to the zoning, what are the risks of having, I take it you're asserting that renters will diminish the quality of life in the neighborhood somehow. What is that relationship between pride of ownership and the zoning that's in front of us today?
Yeah, thanks. And I don't mean to distract from the matter at hand, Councillor Leeper. I think the comment really comes down to the fact that we're trying to create 6 units or 12 units in the 2 buildings into a space that would mitigate the space that each individual will have. I know previously in the first submission, garbage was set outside, and that's been now included within the space of the building footprint. And so I can only imagine that room for storage of material, whether, I mean, I'm a dad with 2 kids and hockey nets and sleds and bicycles all have their place in a family home. But you know, as we look at one single family home having a single hockey net and a single sled or 2, that seems reasonable, be tucked to the side of a house. But as we think about 12 units and you know, the fact that this is an attractive family neighborhood with single family homes, you know, I just fear that there is a risk that the premises may not conform to the standards of the rest of the community.
Okay, so sorry, I will leave the questioning there. I want to sort of try to understand better why renters pose a greater risk to the community, but I will leave it there, Chair.
Yeah, it was not a suggestion of renters. This just happens to be an apartment building that has rental units.
All right, thank you. No further questions. Next person is Don Bell. Hi, Don. See you there. Put your mic on and you have 5 minutes.
Morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you very much for inviting me to contribute this morning. I'm a retired engineer, retired real property manager, lifelong resident of McIntosh Way in Katimavik, which is not right by Maple Grove Road, but very close to it, and also a lifelong community volunteer. I'm also one of the 5 authors of the community response letter that was submitted in reply to this proposal. I'm asking to speak to you today because I'm very disappointed with the way that the 33 Maple Grove review has been conducted. I fully expected that at some point a sensible balance would be found between the applicant's request and the residents' concern. Possibly 4 apartments per building or a row of townhouses, as previous speakers have suggested. What I did not anticipate was how completely city planners would accept every assertion from the applicant and how casually they would dismiss every community resident concern. From the start of this process, many cynics have told me that expressing our concerns was pointless, that the recommendation from city planners was probably already locked in last July before the signs even went up. They told me you can't fight City Hall or the significant influence developers seem to sway. I hated to hear that, not because I wanted to stop 33, but because I wanted intensification in Ottawa to succeed. My professional career tells me this is our only way forward. I also know from hard experience that the general public, constituents, voters, and taxpayers will only embrace tough new processes like intensification if they are seen to be honest, respectful, and fair. Was that what we got on Maple Grove? The concept was simple. Take a large R1M single-family lot, convert it to R4 zoning, and build to those specs, but cap the building height at 11.0 meters to match the current R1M. Sadly, what we got was not even close. The first design stood 14 meters roof peak to ground in the front, 15.3 meters to the parking lot at the back, almost twice the height and 4 times the volume of surrounding single-family homes. When residents expressed concern, a revised came back even taller, but by poking projections and soffits through the roof, managed to claim a reduction in building height. The final proposal arrived with several major exceptions requested. An extra ½ meter of building height, 2 extra apartments per building, parking in the side yard, and others. All quickly recommended by obliging city planners. Although over 250 community residents raised concern after concern, these pleadings were whisked away like mosquitoes in the wind. No, individuals can't beat City Hall, but City Hall can defeat itself. If citizens feel that their concerns are being ignored, that staff are predisposed to serve some applicants well and ignore others completely, it will be impossible to gain the trust or support of the citizens. Ottawa needs smart, effective intensification, but first it needs the support of its citizens. Councillors, I urge you to look carefully at the review process that was used here. Perhaps ask some of the 7 questions you received last night in my written submission. Annex
1 minute.
Please ask yourself, did this review really display the honesty, respect, and fairness that is needed to earn your constituents' support? If not, what do you need to do to make this right? Thank you very much, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. I'll just see whether there are any. There are not. Thank you, Mr. Bell. I'm going to ask if Melody, have you seen either of the Gallants yet?
I have not.
Okay. I'll ask, remind me to ask once at the end of the, when I get down to the end of the delegates, please.
Okay.
Don Nicholson O'Brien, is Don here? And also, I just give you a heads up that between Councillor Deans and Councillor Leeper, they are working on the opportunity to deal quickly with the development charge complaint on Johnston Road. So we may take care of that if that goes through. So Don Nicholson O'Brien, and thank you for your submission. You have 5 minutes. Is there a problem? I turned my mic and my video off because it's better for the pitiful reception I have in Barhaven. Melody, is Dawn here?
Dawn is here. Dawn, can you hear us? Or Greg?
Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead.
I'll go to Steve Morvai. Is Steve here?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Steve's on the phone, so we'll let him.
Okay, we'll go to Steve and then we'll try to go back to Dawn and Greg. Looks like the Maple Grove area has the same problems I have in Barhaven.
Steve, can you go ahead, please?
Can you hear me, Madam Speaker?
Who is this?
This is Dawn Nicholson O'Brien.
Yes,
I
okay,
was
we can
unfortunately,
now.
okay, I was unfortunately reduced to having to use my landline. So thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the Council, and most assuredly, Alan, our representative. I want to say to you that the zoning request that you have before you in no way complements the existing character of the neighborhood, contrary to every assertion made by the city planning staff. And I will echo Don Bell and indeed prior speakers' comments in that regard. The first point that I'd like to make is, a number of years ago, we had the Ruddy Shankman Hospice, not the Rudy Shankman Hospice, as Ms. Gorney said, but the Ruddy Shankman Hospice, that across the street from the proposed 33 Maple Grove Road development was granted a number of exemptions. We had no objection whatsoever to the proposed Ruddy Shankman Hospice variations. Why? Because the setback was exceptionally large, because the building itself was low density, because it was indeed complementary of the existing single-family homes. This development, most assuredly, is not. It is not only more than 2 times the average adjacent family homes in all directions surrounding it, but contrary to the slide on the last page that Ms. Gorney showed you, which in no way represents what is actually the last slide of her presentation, showing a bus and a car before the proposed development, in no way shows the fact that where that car on the road is, there's actually single-family homes to the right of that, across from it, beside it, in every direction. Now, when I look at the sheer number of exceptions and variances that are being sought by this particular proposal, it flies in the face of your published residential fourth density R4 zoning review documents tabled in both on October 14th of last year and thereafter with subsequent amendments in November. And I cite, in response to a question coming from the community, it said, whatever rules you set in rezoning, builders can still go to the committee for variances, and experience shows they usually get approved. Indeed, they do. Any casual reading of the minutes, which I undertook for the last year, shows that indeed they're customarily approved. However, the city says, in relation to a question that was asked, won't these new rules just become a starting point for more variances? The city said this study will, and I quote, set zoning that allows as of right the kind of desirable development, underlined, that shouldn't have to seek a variance. And I repeat, that shouldn't have to seek a variance. But it will also make clear that further variances from those standards are to be generally discouraged. These are the city's own words. The city goes on to say, for example, in the R4 Phase 1 report, we included explanations around intent meant to discourage sequential variances and other abuses of the variance process. These are not my words, these are the city's words. So what variances, pray tell me, are you going to discourage? There are a sizable number of variances being sought here and exceptions. As I said, this is not appropriate to the context in which we find ourselves. We are not in any way opposed to appropriate development. And in reference to earlier questions that were put to Matt Brewery and others, I underline the fact that if the developer were going to be putting forward a development that entailed garden homes, we would have no issue with that. If they were going to be putting forward a proposal for semi-detached homes or single-family homes, we would have no difficulty with that. Two towering buildings do not constitute complementarity. And I agree with Don Bell's comments that City Hall can defeat itself. If the council and the planning members continue to approve these kinds of developments in uniquely family home areas, you're going to find that people are going to start literally bankrolling candidates who take a very different view. And you will also find, and I say this in my former role for many years as a senior executive with the Department of Justice, Attorney General of Canada, that since this does not conform with policy, legal, and other requirements, including those of the province of Ontario, you will find yourself meeting some very considered resistance. And I say that with all due consideration. I saw at several stages at least one councillor rolling his eyes. I would suggest to you that you had better pay attention to what our citizens are saying. These are the citizens who determine whether you're going to play a role at all in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, let's see, do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Leeper has a question for you. Councillor Leeper.
Sorry, it was a question for Aaron related to the comments. Is that appropriate at this point, Chair?
No.
Okay, I'll hold it until staff discussion.
It isn't, but if it's directly related to this delegation.
It is.
Yeah, I think that we'll hold on to it like we always do.
No worries. Thanks, Chair.
No questions for Miss Nicholson O'Brien.
We have Councillor Hubley.
I know. I'm just asking Councillor Leeper. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point one thing out for Dawn, and thank you for coming out to present today. Your input's very much appreciated. You made reference to finding candidates that do not support development. I think it's worth noting here that the FCA and what you would call the left-leaning councillors, including my own opponent in the last election, are on record as supporting 100% intensification. That would translate to most likely a 6-story building on this lot. So it's one of these things where we got to be careful what we wish for here.
I'll tell you, Alan, I'm not, this has nothing to do with a political view, and I think that needs to be understood. I say that knowing full well that this has nothing to do with whether you're a conservative or a liberal or a new Democrat or whatever you are. At the end of the day, it's really about understanding that the character of the residential neighborhoods in which we live, in which we invested sizable sums of money over many decades, where we volunteered tens of thousands of hours to create beautiful community amenities, including parks and Bell Sensplex, where my husband volunteered tens of thousands of hours to come up with fundraising for that institution. We do not expect to be summarily and cavalierly dismissed, as city staff have done repeatedly when we make presentations, who roll their eyes and dismiss and give no weight whatsoever to any of the things that we're saying, who made not one single amendment that we requested, who blithely ignored hundreds and in fact thousands of people who made their views known, and some of whom have no standing because they did not realize that when they signed online petitions, that those petitions are not petitions that necessarily are accepted by the city nor submitted formally. So my point is, city staff need to understand that their obligation must be one where they listen to members of the community, and they have not done so in any meaningful way. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the documents that they tabled were universally favoring the developers' points of view, that any visual renderings that were actually offered, even as part of so-called consultations, were in fact not representative of the reality that you have all around you, with the exception of the Ruddy Shankman Hospice, which is a beautiful building, appropriately designed, consistent with the neighborhood. With the exception of that, they are indeed single-family homes, and they have been thus for more than 40 years.
Thank you.
So
Thank
this
you
is
very much.
not
Thank you very much, Ms. Nicholson O'Brien. Thank you. I don't see any other questions from anyone. No, is Greg O'Brien here? Is he, Melody, do you see him?
Greg
He and Don,
is not currently here.
Okay, I'll call his name again. Is Steve Steve Morvai, or Steve Morvai, is he here? Steve?
yes.
You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready to go.
Yes. Hello.
Hi, go ahead, sir.
Yes. I guess most of the stuff that the other people have already said has been already discussed, but I'm just going to go with one of my statements with regards to my, I guess, engagement with Rizak at the time when he had actually acquired the property. And I'm certainly disappointed with what he's actually doing. In our discussions on the dated houses' turbulent history, the properties, we call it severances, the fire that occurred there, the renovations that have been already done on the property itself, the claim to be unassuming government employee that Shirley stated that he managed to scoop up the home at a bargain price from the former group homeowners. He mentioned it was his investment opportunity. He wanted to fix it up, temporarily rent it out in order to cover the costs as a means to allow him to have time to recover his investment and then retire from his job. He said it will eventually be replaced, including potentially another one on the adjacent lot to increase his return on investment as well. Having now been duped into the actual intentions to tear down the home and put up 2 commercially only monster towering rental complexes instead of only serve to stab the community and me in the back. So it is understandable that the older rundown homes can be replaced, larger lots subdivided for additional family homes, but a blatant welcoming mat was not put out for the owner to bulldoze the area and set up shop as a rental landlord in our homestead. Sorry, not interested in that happening. You want to put up 2 beautiful R1, R2 homes to rent and later sell, go ahead. You want to put up massive, looming, overshadowing walled boxes to cage a dozen residents, no one in the area is going to go for it. The applicant can reconsider the choice and withdraw the proposal, or accept that every measure that the committee is going to put in place will be taken to ensure that the proposal is rejected. Concessions are not supposed to be made by the community, as their disappointment lasts forever, whereas the expectations by the owner is only tempered and forgotten to history. As the committee had an opportunity to review the alternatives that I've already posted on Twitter, because I believe that my engagement with Collett has been pretty abysmal, because she has effectively ignored any of my submissions, and nor have I gotten any responses with regards to her providing committee with alternative recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you. And I will ask Ms. O'Connell when we get into the question part for you to respond to all of these slurs, if you will, against your planner on what she considers or what any planner considers, and the way that the process. I think that what we've heard is there's certainly an opportunity for that kind of clarity when we get to that point. I'm going to make a call for people who were not here. But before I do that, I'm going to move to Councillor Dean's ward. Appears that we have an agreement. It was held by Councillor Leeper. Councillor Leeper wanted to ask questions. He is simply going to dissent now. This is the item development charge complaint. By dealing with this right now, Councillor Deans can go to her police board responsibilities, which she, of course, is chair of, and the staff can get back to work as well. So thank you, Councillor Leeper, for that offer. And so now this is the motion that Vice Chair Gower put forward on behalf of Councillor Deans to sustain the DC complaint and direct that the municipal development charges paid be reimbursed. And so we do have 3 registered speakers, Joshua Moon, Dan McKenna, and Tom Donnelly, and I understand that they have waived their need to speak on this item if we're prepared to carry it. Is that correct? Just one of you needs to.
Yes, Chair Harder, if this motion proceeds, we have no need to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So does anyone on the committee need to speak? Because that will be a game changer and we'll go back to our, I don't see anything.
Just one clarifying question.
Remember, I just interrupted an item. What is the clarifying question? Because I'm sorry, but we'll have to go back if it's not a simple one.
I just want clarification if the motion that is right now on the floor refunds the entire amount.
Yes. Yes, it does.
So this contradicts the staff recommendation.
Yes. Okay, so I'll call for a quick yeas and nays on this then, so it's recorded. Councillor Dudas? And this is on the Vice Chair Gower motion that you see before you.
Right. I'm a little bit confused as well.
Okay, we're going back to holding it then.
Yeah,
okay?
I'm sorry. I don't want to vote on it until I'm clear.
No, that's fine. Absolutely no problem. I made an exception, a big exception in doing that. Councillor Deans, I don't know. I think that you can, go back, do what you need to do. But we're going back to the item and I'm going to see, okay, who did I miss in the Gallants, Melanie and John Gallant? And you've not seen them come into the Zoom room?
I'll just do a quick check and no, I'm not seeing them.
Okay, and then Greg O'Brien. Have you seen Greg?
Greg was with Dawn, so let me just see if he was going to speak. Dawn, can you please indicate if Greg is speaking today?
No, he isn't.
Okay, thank you. Have I covered everybody then in the of the neighbors? Yeah.
Yes, apart from the applicants, that's everybody.
Okay, so we have 2 speakers speaking on behalf of the applicant. We have Taylor West first, and then Murray Chown. And it's up to you which order you go in, but those are the 2 speakers I have registered. Taylor West?
So, Madam Chair, it's Murray Chown, and I will be speaking on behalf of the applicant with respect to this report. Mr. West is here to assist me should I need help in answering any questions from
Then you
members.
go ahead, please. Go ahead, Mr. Chown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me start by saying that we fully support the staff recommendations that are before you this morning. We thank Ms. Gorney for her report, which, as you can tell, has been written in the face of some very fierce criticism from some of the residents in the community. We thank her for her presentation, and I'll try not to repeat much of what she said. So I can go to the next screen, please. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think it's important to remind you all of the decisions that you made last spring with respect to the growth management strategy for the City of Ottawa going forward to the year 2046. You made a decision last spring that over 92,000 new residential units would be built in the existing built-up area by the year 2046. To be abundantly clear, that isn't limited to the neighborhoods inside the Greenbelt, that it is in order for the city to meet its growth management strategy, you must accommodate additional units outside the Greenbelt in the communities of Canada, Barrhaven, Riverside South, and Orleans. The only way you are going to get there is by working together with the industry in order to achieve these significant levels of intensification within your existing neighborhoods. I need not remind you that there were many delegations before you in the spring of last year encouraging you to actually approve a growth strategy which would have achieved 100% growth through intensification by the year 2046. I think the consensus was that that might be unrealistic, but we have a long way to go to meet those intensification targets, and the project before you today is one very small step along that way. Next slide, please. Madam Chair, I don't need to dwell on this. The subject site is located in the Katimavik communities, Canada Centrum in the 417 to the north, Terry Fox Drive to the west, and Hazeldean Road to the south. If we can go to the next slide, please. Madam Chair, members of committee, I think this is a really important slide to consider, particularly as we start the conversation about 15-minute neighborhoods. What's highlighted here within is all of the various facilities that exist in the Hazeldean Katimavik neighborhood, or at least that portion of that neighborhood north of Hazeldean Road. Within the purple circle, which is 1 kilometer from the subject site, you have schools, you have parks, you have recreational complexes, you have the Ron Maisland Playhouse, you have restaurants, and just on the fringe of that 1,000-meter circle, you have food stores, you have Sobeys, you have Farm Boy, and I guess most importantly, you have the LCBO. So we can all have a drink when this is over. Then go to the next slide, please. Madam Chair, members of the committee, this slide highlights your planned transit system as it's shown in your official plan today. It highlights the existing BRT, which services the Canada Centrum. It identifies planned rapid transit extending further west from the Canada Centrum in the future. It identifies Terry Fox Drive and Hazeldean Road as transit priority corridors. This site is within easy walking distance or cycling distance of major transit facilities existing and planned for Canada. Next slide, please. Ms. Gorney included this site plan in her presentation, and I just want to highlight a couple of things here in response to some of the comments that we've heard this morning. There's an awful lot of green space on this site plan. We are proposing to plant a number of new trees as part of this development to contribute to the city's urban tree canopy. There is a huge setback between this proposed development and the existing homes on Young's Ponds Court to the east. There's a large landscaped area between the parking area and those properties to the east. Lastly, just quickly, there were comments about storm drainage. There's been plenty of discussion, lengthy discussions between the project engineer and the city's engineering staff. They have arrived at a servicing solution to this property, which does include the extension of a storm sewer on Maple Grove Road to serve this development, and then with storm connections from both properties to that new storm sewer. Madam Chair, I promised I'd be brief. I'm going to go to my last slide, and then I'll welcome any questions from members of the committee. Madam Chair, this slide is very similar to a slide that was in Ms. Gorney's presentation, but I just want to take my remaining time to walk everybody through what this chart illustrates. The left-hand column are the performance standards of the existing R1M zone. The two right-hand columns are what are actually going to be provided if this project goes forward. So I'll run through the chart. Minimum lot width under the existing zone today is 15 meters. The proposed lot widths are 17.3 and 15.8. The minimum lot area under the existing R1M zone is 450 square meters. What's being proposed are two lots, one of 865 square meters and the other one of 750 square meters. The permitted height today on this property is 11 meters. We are requesting relief or a site-specific provision which would allow for a height of 11.5 meters, half a meter higher than what's permitted today. Front yard setback in the existing zoning is 4.5 meters. We're providing 4.5 meters. Corner side yard setback under the existing zoning is 4.5 meters. We're providing 4.5 meters. Interior side yard setback requirement today is 1 meter. We are providing interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters. And on the south side of the property adjacent to the existing single-family home, we're going to provide a side yard setback of 3 meters, well in excess of the requirement today. And the minimum rear yard setback requirement today is 7.5 meters. This project is going to provide a rear yard setback in excess of 22 meters. The point I'm trying to make here is that the buildings that are being proposed are no bigger than what's permitted as of right today, with the exception of the existent 0.5 meter in building height. The direction in the new official plan and the direction that's being talked about for the new zoning bylaw that will come out of the new official plan is we're not going to worry about the number of units that are inside the box. We just want to make sure that the box is appropriate on the street. The two apartment buildings that are being proposed match the building envelope that's permitted on the street. We simply want the permission to have 6 units in that box instead of 2, which you would be allowed with a single family home and a secondary dwelling unit. There's been some comment about the relief to get from 4 units to 6. Low-rise apartment buildings are not limited to 4 stories. And inside the Greenbelt, they are generally permitted to be 8 units or more. The application before you today is exactly what the council is anticipating with the adoption of the growth management strategy, and it's exactly what's being proposed to council in your draft official plan that you will be dealing with over the course of the next few months. I would encourage Planning Committee to support staff, support their recommendations, and approve the applications that are before you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chown. And just for clarification, you did go over your 5 minutes, but was only allowed because Taylor West is not speaking. Okay. And he had registered to speak. So we do have questions for you, Mr. Chown. First up is Jeff Leeper, Councillor Leeper, then Councillor Brockington, and then Councillor Hughley.
Thank you very much, Chair. So Murray, this morning, and forgive me, I hope you're able to help me out with this. This morning at 2:43, 2:45 Hinchy, we approved a 16-unit, no parking, low-rise apartment building on a lot that, by my calculations, has around 590 square meters. And it is in a neighborhood on which there are, multiple single-family homes. The applicant on whose behalf you're speaking is asking us to approve 2 6-unit buildings for a total of 12 apartment units on a lot that is, and forgive me, my calculations are rough, 1,700, a little over 1,700 square meters. Can you, so obviously, the intensification is fairly, it's of a much different nature downtown. Can you speak, though, to the difference in affordability in a city that has a 1.8% vacancy rate that is persistent between the low-rise apartment building on Hinchy and these low-rise apartment buildings in Canada? Is there likely to be a difference in the affordability of those in such a tight market?
Counselor, I wish I could answer that question for you. I can't. The only observation I could make is I strongly suspect that the land cost for this development is lower than what was paid for the property on Hinchy, but I'm only speculating.
And I apologize for putting you in that position because you weren't involved with the 243, 245. But can you speak more generally about differences in affordability between neighborhoods in wards like Kitchissippi and neighborhoods like Canada?
I think the comment that I can make is introducing rental apartment housing in this neighborhood is going to increase the supply of more affordable housing. This neighborhood, as everybody has pointed out to you, is made up of well-established single-family homes. We're introducing a form of housing which will be affordable for a different sector of our population.
I tend to agree, obviously. It is important that all of our neighborhoods offer options for everyone. None of our neighborhoods should be exclusive to just those who are able to afford the most expensive type of housing that the market offers, which is single family housing. There is, I would assert, going to be a significant difference in the rental price between what we approved on Hinchy this morning and what is going to be available further afield from the downtown core. And it's going to be critical that we have these rental options in neighborhoods that aren't gentrified to the extent the Kitchissippi ward is. There are a lot of renters who would like to live in Kitchissippi ward, but who cannot. And the demand and the land costs in Kitchissippi are driving rentals that are unaffordable to all but the most privileged in our city. We need to ensure the availability of rental, and especially what this is, low rise with lots of green space rental. Compared to what we approved this morning, which has a relatively small, I'll put it diplomatically, rear yard, this development is going to have significant green space around it, significant buffer to the houses around it, and offers the opportunity to start offering a different kind of housing in a neighborhood that thus far has been exclusive to only one type of buyer. Murray, another question for you has to do with something I've heard over and over again this morning, which is variances. And I know it's tough for residents to understand the difference between variances from the zoning and exemptions from the zoning. What you're asking for this morning is a site-specific zoning, correct?
Thank you for that question, Councillor, because we're not seeking variances from anything. We're starting with a clean slate. The property is currently in an R1 zone. In order to allow for the low-rise apartments, we need to rezone it to an R4 zone. It could be any R4 zone, and we could even have written our own brand new R4 zone to respect the performance standards or even to match the performance standards of the existing R1M subzone. It's not the city's practice to do that. It's the city's practice to find an R4 subzone that is kind of close and then fine tune it for the project. We're not seeking relief from an R4J or an M or an L or whatever it is. We're just trying to write an R4 zone which will allow this project to go forward, but restrict it to performance standards and a built envelope that is actually more restrictive than the existing R1M zone. So we're not looking for relief from anything in terms of the R4 zones.
I appreciate that, and I think it's important for the committee to understand that, you know, what we're asking, or what you are asking for, is not approval of something that diverges from R4J. What you are asking for is the zoning that enables this project, and the responsibility of the committee is to ensure that the zoning you are asking for meets with the plans and policies of the city. And your argument is that it does. This committee will have to determine whether or not it agrees with you. But we're not being asked to determine whether or not variances from the R4J are appropriate. We're being asked to consider whether or not the zoning that you're asking for meets with the policies that are in place that guide development in the city of Ottawa. So I appreciate that clarity. Thank you very much, Murray. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next up is Councillor Brockington, followed by Councillor Hughley. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Chown, this may be more of a site plan question, but can you just briefly discuss whether or not there is a water retention issue on the property? There was some reference made to stormwater ponds. What's the context here?
There will be what we call dry ponds on the site to deal with quantity control. There isn't going to be water sitting on this property all times of the year. If there's a heavy storm event, there will be some water that accumulates in those small ponds at the back of the property, and then they will drain out to the new storm sewer in the street. But there isn't going to be water sitting on this site.
But what makes water accumulate here versus any other property in the area?
Well, it accumulates on every property in the area, and certainly, Councillor, in your ward, the subdivisions are designed so that in heavy storm events that the water does accumulate and then slowly trickles out into the storm sewers or out into the storm ponds. So it's no different. What will be happening on this site is no different than any other new development in the city.
Okay, that's the clarity I needed from Mr. Chown. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Murray, for being here today too. I want to thank Councillor Brockington for getting you to clarify a little more on that stormwater issue, because that was a concern raised by residents as well as myself through the process, because the issue of the stormwater didn't really come up until December because the engineering report followed the application, I believe. So it's good to have the clarification now that you're not actually storing water on property other than a dry pond, which would be expected to drain within hours into the existing system, depending on the extent of the storm. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. Well, thank you for getting that worked out, because it was a significant concern. The other thing I want to mention, if I may, Madam Chair, is in response to Councillor Leeper's questions to Murray about the affordability factor. In my ward alone, and I'm sure Councillor Gower might want to add to this as well, in my ward alone, I have 500 other apartment units in various stages of construction right now. We didn't have this type of discussion around it. One's a 9-story building on a corner. The nearby residents in the public meetings were able to get the answers to what they needed and everything. The difference to that from that to here, beyond location, is that this all took place during our COVID lockdown measures. And so while we had a Zoom call meeting, for many of us, it was the first time to try to hold one of those meetings and get this information out to residents. So I appreciate that this was going to be more difficult than the 9-story building. And the rest of the apartments are 3 to 4 story buildings going into existing neighborhoods that, yes, there was concerns at the start. We were able to work through them. So I want to assure my colleagues that Canada South is going to have more apartments. There will be a level of affordability in there too. And that adds to what exists today, which, you know, out here, it's not social housing. It goes under different names because it was set up back in the 70s and 80s. But there's housing for everybody within the community. So thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me get that clarified. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's it for questions of the delegations. So we're going to go into questions of staff, if anybody has any questions of staff. And first up is Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. So my questions for staff, you know, we've heard a lot of assertions around process, and I think that there is significant resentment that city staff did not evaluate alternatives that were put forward by the community. And I guess my question is, what is your responsibility with respect to a development application in terms of developing a recommendation for this committee? What is your purview?
Madam Chair, if I may take the response to Councillor Leeper's question.
Yes, please.
Appreciating the question, Councillor. And I just want to respond as well to some of the assertions made by some of the delegations. Planners in development review, including Colette, we're consummate professionals. So our job is to review the application that's before us today. It's to make recommendations to the committee on this, reflecting the public interest as a whole. So we do ask for input from relevant stakeholders in the area, neighbors and so on. But we also look at the public interest as a whole that's reflected in our policies, including our official plan. So we go to the policy direction, we look at the existing context and the planned context of the area. We seek that input from stakeholders, and then we review those concerns that are expressed by stakeholders as part of every application. So I do want to say that it's unfortunate that some of the delegations feel that their concerns were not heard, but I can assure you, Madam Chair and councillors, that each and every comment that was submitted by members of the public were reviewed by my staff, and in many cases myself as well, and considered and reviewed as part of the consideration of this report before committee today. But what is before us today, and what was staff's responsibility to consider, was the application that was submitted. There were also some changes made through the course of that review of the application to reflect some of those concerns that were expressed by members of the community.
I appreciate that clarity, that it's not planners' job to determine what the best proposal should be, that the applicants are able to move ahead with an application for a rezoning that they consider meets the policies that the city has, and that your job is to determine, in light of all the feedback that you hear, whether or not that is the case, so that you can make a recommendation to this committee, which will ultimately decide whether or not we are meeting our policies. What is the recourse? We heard, you know, people making threats to take this further with legal. Are we going to get sued if council makes a decision that people don't like?
I'll take
How
that.
about Mr. Mark answer that?
Certainly, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, as committee is aware, the recourse, if the application is approved, is of course for someone who feels it's not in consistent with the provincial policy statement or conforms to the official plan, to appeal it to the tribunal. If the application is refused, then of course the applicant can appeal it to the local planning appeal tribunal.
And will the local planning appeal tribunal apply any criteria that our planners are not applying and that this committee is beholden to apply in terms of evaluating what that the appropriateness or not of this application?
Madam Chair, the local planning appeal tribunal will be applying the same considerations that staff have to apply in making their recommendations to you.
Okay, so there is a path forward if residents feel that the decision by this committee and the decision by council are not appropriate. There is a well-worn path at the local planning appeal tribunal, and they'll be applying the same lens that we will as well. Sorry, one further question, Chair of Staff. With respect to whether or not this conforms to the R4J and whether or not variances are appropriate to R4J, is that how planning staff look at these applications? Oh, I have one other question as well, sorry. But you know, what is the applicability of the R4J to this particular application?
Councillor, I would echo the sentiments of Mr. Chown in terms of his response, and that what we were looking at was the change from the R1 zone to a zoning that would reflect and accommodate what the desirable development proposal is moving forward on this project. So it wasn't necessarily looking at the changes between reflected in the exceptions to that R4 zone, but it was essentially, as sort of the charts were outlined in Colette's presentation and Mr. Chown's as well, what we were looking at was what's the difference between the existing R1 zoning right now and what's before us as part of this package of as the amendment before us, and going through each and every one of those performance standards on the lot. The main difference is the number of units. I'll be frank, a lot of the setbacks are respected and in fact are much greater than what would be permitted under the R1 zoning. And so in that case, then we look at the number of units, how the impacts from those units can be accommodated on site. So things like garbage, parking on site, amenity area, landscaping. And if those can all be accommodated on the site, then what we're really looking at is that a proposal with an increased number of units then in fact better responds to the city's goals of intensifications and accommodating that range of dwelling units that we're looking for to make up well-rounded communities.
Thank you. And my final question for staff is, what is the role of tenure? What role does that play in the decision by staff to approve or not a development? Do we take into account, for example, the assertion that renters don't take the same pride of ownership in a community and that can change the dynamics of a community? That's not that's not an assertion that I agree with, obviously, but do we consider whether or not it's rental or ownership?
I'll answer that in one word, no. We don't consider tenure as part of our consideration of the application. There is always the possibility down the road that applications for apartments can seek to be created as condominiums as well. But quite simply, no, we don't look at tenure when we're evaluating.
As is appropriate. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up is Vice Chair Gower.
Thank you, Chair. I just had 3 observations as I've been listening to all the discussions. One, the height seems to be something that we've heard a lot about, and I would like to observe that the increase in height that's being sought here is 50 centimeters, which is 19 inches, which is smaller than most televisions in people's living rooms right now. It's not a significant increase to the allowable height in the zoning, 50 centimeters. On transit, I do agree with Councillor Hubley that the transit in Canada and Stittsville is in need of significant improvements, particularly outside of rush hours, of peak times. I also did look at the map, and this location would be about 1.5 kilometers from the planned LRT station at Maple Grove. So in the future, it will be pretty close from a higher order transit station. It's about 2 kilometers, although not quite a convenient walk to get to the Terry Fox station, which is there right now. The other one is on types of homes. And we've heard a lot about how this neighborhood is full of single homes. And while it's true that I think that McCurdy Drive has a lot of singles, Kitimavik also has many townhomes. There is an existing multi-story apartment building. So there is already some variety in housing. And I suppose to echo some of what Councillor Leeper was just touching on, I think as councillors, committee members, community members, we have to be really careful about the kind of language that we choose. I think there's some insinuation happening today and in other planning developments that apartment renters are not as good for a neighborhood as homeowners. So when we use words like single family homes as opposed to apartment units, I think it really colors and biases our discussions. Perhaps we could call this proposed development a development of single family apartments. We're going to see very similar families and people living in these apartments as we might see in the homes down the street. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gower. And I guess to wrap it up on the questions or the item, Councillor Hublich.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for another opportunity here. I want to go back and touch with staff on this 11-meter height issue. I'm sure most other councillors are probably in the same boat as me. I did not know until this application came forward that an existing neighborhood such as this, that had basically been built and with the exception of the hospice, untouched since the 80s, actually had a zoning that allowed for 11 meters, but nobody ever built to that 11 meters. I'm perplexed as to why they zoned it 11 meters back then. What was the vision that they were thinking of? But I think the question I want from staff is how can we go about communicating to residents in our existing neighborhoods as we go forward with the move towards intensification? I think we need to communicate what the existing zoning is and what that means. Because in this particular case, as Councillor Gower pointed out, there's not a lot of height in the actual paper request here. There's some dispute over how it was measured, and I think, Aaron, you were going to reference that in your comments so that the public participating today would also have an understanding of how that height piece is measured here. But I'm just looking for taking this opportunity to ask staff for some suggestions. I know I've had good talks with Doug James. I don't know if he wants to weigh in on this, but going forward, this is something that we as a council need to be able to do with our residents, and that is review the existing zoning before we start looking at intensification.
Councillor, perhaps I'll start off with a response and then Mr. James can chime in. In terms of a broader policy piece, I know as part of the New Year work plan for the department, we're looking at a zoning review that will accommodate that official plan review coming forward. So I think that's in the work plan, and he can certainly advise further on that. On the height provisions on the particular property itself, I might ask my planner Colette just to clarify how height is calculated on a particular property. And she can clarify again how height was measured and that it was done and how it was done in this particular case.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Madam Chair. So in this case, because it is a pitched roof, the building height is being measured as the vertical distance between the average grade at the base of the main wall of the building, and it goes to the midpoint of the roof between the ridge and the eaves of the building, excluding the eaves of any projections. And so in response to public concerns about how building height was calculated, the plans or the submission was forwarded to Building Code Services, who, if this application is successful, would be responsible for issuing a building permit. And they confirmed that building height was calculated correctly by the applicant. And it was also forwarded to the Zoning Interpretations Unit, and they confirmed that the dormers provided on the roofs are considered projections and they are not considered within the calculations for building height. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, just to finish off.
Can I just get clarification on Colette's comment there? So the extended eaves are not part of the calculation as suggested in some comments provided?
The eaves of the main roof are considered, but the eaves of the dormers are not considered as they're projections and not used in building height calculations.
Greater
Okay.
projections.
Okay.
And
Sorry,
just
Doug, to interrupt, but I want to get that clarified if I could in there.
No worries. Just Madam Chair, just to finish up with, and Aaron and Colette did an excellent job presenting with respect to, well, the overall development, but with respect to height, 11 meters, and that's something you'll find, as I say, throughout the city, not just here in this neighborhood, but throughout the city. It's in there, creates an envelope that, of course, that the building could be under, or in certain cases when you measure the height to half, if it's a peaked roof, to the midpoint. But it was established as it's a low rise, still considered to be a low rise development. So City Council, when passing the zoning, said that 11 meters still low rise, so you have the ability to go up to that height. With respect to the new zoning bylaw, we will be doing that. We're doing a new official plan this year, and immediately following that, as required, we have to go through the process of instituting a new zoning bylaw. So there will be many opportunities for when staff will go out to the public, for the public to have input into that new zoning bylaw. And one of those issues, and as you say, as the Councillor Hubley says, getting the word out that yes, there is a height limit on all properties, and in many instances it is 11 meters, still considered to be a low rise at that height. So there will be, I say, the opportunity for people to understand and know about it, because you're right, a lot of times people aren't aware that this height limit exists because they don't go check the zoning of their properties, every day, or until something like this comes along. So certainly as part of that review, it will be put out there, sort of so that people are aware and have the opportunity to have input into that.
Thank you, Doug. So my next and last question, Madam Chair, is on the issue of transit. We see it a lot with applications that come to the committee, and Councillor Leeper referenced earlier some of the things that he's experienced as the councillor for his area. The difference being between the two neighborhoods as far as transit goes, Councillor Leeper is about to get LRTs there. The stations are literally being built as we sit here today. The bus service is totally different than what we experience in the burbs. This particular location, which is what we're dealing with today, really only has morning and afternoon service to get to the park and ride and back. It's from the park and ride you can get to other areas, but you can't go anywhere around the community in any kind of a reasonable time. Often you're taking a bus to Bayshore and then coming back, depending on where you're going here. So I want to say that while I can understand, and I've supported Councillor Leeper in the past where there's been exceptions to the parking requirements, because it's reasonable to suggest that you can cycle or take transit in your community, it's not the same out here. You can't from here go to a grocery store and back on your bike with any kind of purchase other than one or two items, and you're going to be looking at probably an hour's ride to get there. So it's something I want staff to factor in until we get to build the transit. As Councillor Gower referenced, there will be a nearby station there in the future when we start the work on phase 3. But until we do that, unless we get improvements to transit within this community, we cannot even consider any parking exceptions to things that we are looking at approving within the suburbs, and at least in Canada, and I'm sure Glenn would probably say the same for his area, as would Councillor Sudds. So on that note, Madam Chair, I want to thank everybody for their involvement. I think you've got all the information here. You clearly understand, I hope, why I need to support my residents on this application. And I want to thank you all for your participation too. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hubley. I know how much effort and time you put into this application and how hard you've worked on it. And I want to thank the staff as well, because certainly I know that Mr. James and his team have spent a lot of time, and I was part of that time as well. So, and here we are. I think that's it. I don't have any more speakers. So I think we'll have a recorded vote on this item. I'll go by my memory. Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
I think I'm going to Vice Chair Gower now. Is that right? Councillor Hubley?
Yeah, I'm voting no, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gower?
Yes.
And myself, yes. The item carries. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody who came out today. I know you two have put a lot of time into this, and I thank you for that time. The next item up is one that I tried to deal with, and I think all I did was confuse a lot of people. It's pretty simple, actually. Councillor Deans is still with us, and this is the development charge complaint. 1325 Johnston Road. Vice Chair Gower did move a motion on behalf of Councillor Deans to sustain the DC complaint and direct that the municipal development charges paid be reimbursed. The difference, for clarification, is that the staff recommendation recommends a repayment, but not the full repayment. This recommendation does. Now, we do have three people who previously, the last time I asked, said that they didn't need to speak. I am going to ask Councillor Deans to, as succinctly as possible, and really keep it, it's just getting, people are getting more and more confused, okay? So the language needs to be, this is what it is, this, and then I will ask the applicant if they need to speak, and hopefully what you will say will be what is needed to be heard. So Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be very succinct. I did lay it out earlier, I think about 9:30 this morning, the basic issue. This is a development charge issue. The staff have classified it in a certain way. The applicant is asking for it to be considered industrial. It is an industrial zone. The difference is they have basically categorized it like an auto repair center. A traditional auto repair center has a storefront. You and I can walk through the door. It's a commercial in nature. We can have our tires changed or rotated or oil changed. In this, these are basically fleet repairs that a whole fleet would come in. There's no commercial use. And so the applicant, in effect, is saying that the staff, and the staff, I think, will tell you this themselves, that it doesn't fit neatly into any category that we currently have. So it's a judgment call. And I'm just saying that it's a significant amount of money when this is really a use that we don't have a lot of precedent for. And I think Councillor Harder, you pointed out that Lexus had a similar issue and received the same relief that we're asking for today. So I think that's as succinct as I could put it. I don't think it's a cut and dry case. I understand what the staff said, but I'm asking the committee to recognize that this is a different use. It's not commercial in nature, and that they should be given this development charge relief. Thank you.
Right, and that was much better than 9:30 this morning. Okay? I'll say that. And you know, the example that I was mentioning was on MacArthur, and it was, the difference is, and I can remember Councillor Kadri, actually, he was trying really hard to get the point across that this was not, they weren't selling anything here. Like you said, there was no storefront. And staff are in a position that they have to come up with the recommendation they do, because we don't have that nice tight title that goes with this kind of purpose. Councillor Tierney and I will very much remember Papa Jack and the popcorn debacle that we've eventually got to a, it's just these things that it's not everything fits into the same box. In this case, it's a hospital, if you will, for Tesla. In the case on MacArthur, in the previous term or the one before that, it was a hospital for Lexus. But you couldn't go there and get your nice warm cover for the wheel, or not that they wouldn't already have heated steering wheels, because I'm sure they all do, but those, anything, you know, that you wouldn't be going to buy that. It's strictly a hospital for a particular brand of car. So now I'll ask Mr. Moon, Mr. McKenna, or Mr. Donnelly if they would like to speak today.
I certainly would like to address the definition of industrial use in connection with this complaint and with the use at hand. I, first of all, thank Councillor Deans. I am legal counsel for Donnelly Automotive Group in this matter, and for Tridan, which is the actual owner of the property. There are two functions that take place at this property on Johnson Road, about 20,000 square feet of fleet center and about 16,000 square feet of collision center. I recognize Chair Harder's comment, a hospital for Tesla. They actually repair more than Tesla, but it's a specialized location. One of the uses for Tesla, it's a new product, and they're doing research and development, but on how to fix Teslas. And the pictures that were with my supplementary submissions yesterday are in fact of a Tesla. The focus here is Section 20 of the Development Charges Act. It allows a complainant to ask you, well, counsel, but you sit in lieu of counsel, to rectify an error or determination by staff. I'm going to go farther than Councillor Deans and say, I don't actually think it's a gray area. The definition is in the staff report. It's in our original complaint. It's in my supplementary report. But the important thing is the process that happens inside this expansion area. That's what you look at. You don't look at the labels. Amazon euphemistically calls their big buildings they're building in town or on the edges of town fulfillment centers, whatever that means. So you don't look at the word repair. Amazon is a warehouse and distribution center. This is where automobiles get reconstructed and improved. They're seriously damaged. In some cases, their utility is nil. Certainly their value is greatly reduced. When the vehicle comes out, its value is returned. It is an improved value. The method by which it's done is by the use of equipment and hand repairs and hand industrial activities. They assemble by hand or machinery using equipment, machinery, hands. They draw on supplies that were stored there in the building beside the automobiles that are being subject to the industrial process. And when it comes out, it's an improved product. As a side issue, happens to be a lot of Teslas going in there because it's the designated Tesla spot for some research and development around repairing them because it's a new product. But that's not the central focus. I'll read the words in the definition. Buildings used for physical manufacturing or physical assembly by hand or machinery that leads to new or improved products, also warehousing, also research and development related to physical assembly by hand or machinery. My respectful submission is that in fact, the actual use that takes place in there is an industrial activity and it meets the industrial definition and should be given the industrial development charge. It's a reduced rate. I have to embarrassingly say to you that at the time that I was brought this matter, I focused on the definition, as did a very good land use planner, and we spent time focused on the definition, and I actually missed Section 4 of the Development Charges Act. And I had to embarrassingly later, when the staff report come out, say to my client, you know what, staff's right. If this is an industrial use, and I argue it is, it's not that ambiguous, the activity that takes place in the expansion area is an industrial process. It's physical assembly by hand or machinery. And you've got the pictures. You see what they do. They rip a car apart and they put it back together. It's not putting a wiper on. It's not changing the brakes or changing the oil. It's a physical assembly that's industrial. But when you designated that, then the development.
Mr. Moon.
Yeah.
I think your time is up.
Well, it is a hearing under Section 20 of
No, you
the
have 5 minutes, which I said at the beginning. And
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
But thank you. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Donnelly and Mr. McKenna, do you wish to speak? Mr. Donnelly, your mic's off. Your mic is off. Thank you.
Can you hear me
Yep,
now?
we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. First of all, Madam Chair, committee members, Councillor Deans, thank you for your time today. Happy New Year to you all. And before I make my comments, as a citizen, I just want to say I think the city's done a great job with COVID. So you're keeping us safe, and pass that on to everybody because you've done a really good job.
Thank you.
Clearly, this is it's an honest mistake or a misinterpretation that's taken place. The comparables that were given to us don't apply. This is not retail space. There's no customers. It is a cinder block, hard metal repair place. And the 4,000 square foot addition that we've done is clearly in the definition of industrial. There's no ambiguity here, absolutely none. And I really hope that the staff understand that this is not, it's not a retail automotive. There's no automotive. This is strictly industrial. And it's a mistaken interpretation. It may be ambiguous, but we fall within the definition. And I would ask the committee to support our situation, especially in these difficult times where already we've seen, just based on the impact of COVID, collisions are down significantly, which is probably a good thing for everybody else, but not good for us. So anyways, we just ask for your support on this. It is just a mistake or a misinterpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. McKenna, you good with what's been said?
Yes, I'm fine with what Tom.
Oh, there you are.
Can
Okay,
you
thanks, Dan.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm fine with what Tom and Joshua communicated already. So I want to
All
thank
right.
the committee.
Thank you. So as you know, you have the back to committee. Just make sure that there are no more. Oh, there's still people waving. Councillor Leeper and Councillor Brockington.
Thank you very
Was
much,
this-
Chair.
Who is this to? I should ask you that first.
To the applicants, and I assume staff will ask as well, or not the applicants, but the appellants, I guess, in this case. So I don't want to stick it to a local business at a difficult time, and obviously you folks are a significant employer, but we waive development charges at our peril. We need development charges to pay for things that residents and everyone needs, businesses alike, in order to accommodate growth in the city. So it's important that we get it right. And Mr. Moon, you spoke a couple of times, and I think you left out some clauses on a couple of occasions with respect to the definition of what is industrial. Industrial is structures intended for use for physical manufacturing or physical assembly by hand or machinery that leads to new or improved products. Industrial spaces are spaces where we make things. And my understanding of this appeal is that it hinges upon whether or not this is industrial. If it's not a space where people make things, then it's subject to the development charges as determined by staff. What are you making here? What is the improved product that results? A vehicle has been damaged. It goes in. It comes out in the state that it was before it was damaged. How is that industrial? And the intent of that section is really, really clear, that industrial means making things.
With respect, Councillor Leeper, I think it's making things or improving things. And this is an improved product. It goes in damaged and comes out improved. And if this is an area of ambiguity for you, I remind you that all courts in Ontario and Canada, Supreme Court of Canada, has said with a taxing statute where there's an ambiguity, the taxpayer should get the benefit of the ambiguity. It's in the definition, it leads to new or improved product.
So is the vehicle better? And you know what, we can argue about these all day and night, and I don't want to rehash it. The Mizrahi discussion, I think, was like 2 hours of discussion over a couple of words. But there is no improved product that comes out the other end here. The product is restored to what it was before it was damaged. And so for that reason, I need to dissent on this. But certainly with respect to the definition, I think you're making a creative case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington.
Madam Chair, my questions were literally asked by Councillor Leeper. I'm struggling with the connection. When I hear the words improved products, I think about a company that receives logs and makes picnic tables. They take something that's of lesser value and they make it into something that has a greater value. And that's not happening here. So I've got questions for staff that I need greater understanding.
Okay. All right, so we'll close down the delegations and go to staff. And our staff person, what do we have here for staff?
Madam Chair, it's myself and Mr. Ash.
Okay, have at it, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Mark, can you please provide us in layman's language how you determined your findings, or how the findings for this matter were previously determined?
Madam Chair, it of course is initially Mr. Ash, Mr. Ash's group who made the findings, so I'm going to pass this question to him as that's where the process started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to go through, yes, staff obviously have to make determinations of the use that is carried out in this building or any building that they review. And I agree with Councillor Deans that interpretations have to be made. Obviously, definitions can't drill down into all the minutiae potential scenarios that may come before us. But the idea of industrial manufacturing, I would also agree with Councillor Leeper that it's staff's interpretation of the bylaw, and there is some interpretation to be had, that there is no improvement, as was stated, that this is a service of repair. And be it that the service is being given to an insurance company or the service is being given to a member of the public who shows up at the doorstep, it was staff's assertion and belief that this is still, and has been for the last 20 years, this has been our interpretation on the industrial use definition, that it is a service of repair that is being rendered here. And we felt to remain consistent that is what was happening at this location as well, albeit maybe more extensive repair than might happen, the changing of brakes or the changing of oil, but There's also engine repairs and engine replacements that go in, some significant stuff that goes on in repair garages. But that we felt this was, albeit at the high end of that it is still a service of repair that is being rendered, and by that definition, we would sit on the side of a non-industrial use, on an industrial use. So yeah, that's basically what we've done. I think staff have made the correct determination. It's a consistent determination. And with all respect to the complainant, I feel that staff have made the correct determination that it is a non-industrial use that's taking place here, and it's a service of repair that is being undertaken.
I just want to say, in the interest of time, I agree with your assessment, and I will be upholding your original recommendation to this committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands waving. Just check one more time. No. All right, so on the floor.
Scott has his hand up, Jan. Scott has his
Who
hand up.
does now?
Scott.
He didn't when I looked at the participant list. You go ahead, Scott.
Thank you. Just quickly, in all this definition stuff, our zoning bylaw, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, our zoning bylaw under light industrial use means under C says the repair or servicing. So it's A, the manufacture from previously prepared materials of finished parts or finished products. B, factory or assembly line processes that involve the manufacture, processing, assembly, or packaging of finished parts or finished products made from previously prepared materials. Or C, the repair or servicing of such products. That's from bylaw 2010-237. In that case, we have in our own zoning bylaw a definition of light industrial use that does include the repair or servicing of such products. How does that pertain to this then?
Madam Chair, I'll take that. Madam Chair, it is very important for the reasons just outlined by the councillor that one looks to the definition in place. It's my understanding that this land carries an industrial zoning, and when one reflects upon the language that the councillor just read out, that is consistent with the repairs taking place at this facility. That is worked into that definition of industrial. This definition found in the development charges bylaw is worded differently. It does not include repair, and that is why the staff came to the conclusion that this is a non-industrial use.
Fair. So that would then lead to Mr. Moon was talking about ambiguity. You have a definition of industrial in the zoning bylaw and a definition of industrial in the development charges bylaw that don't necessarily align themselves, correct?
Madam Chair, I wouldn't say that creates an ambiguity. One definition reads one way and it should be applied according to its words, the zoning definition. This definition reads differently. They are clear to me, Madam Chair. The fact that they are different does not, in my opinion, create an ambiguity.
Thank you.
Okay, so looking back now, we have another person with their hand up, Glenn Gower.
Thank you, Chair. My question is cognizant that, simple question. What's the time limit where someone can appeal for reversal of a development charge? Like, are we opening ourselves up here to other appeals coming forward all of a sudden? Is there a time limit?
There is, Madam Chair, 90 days. I don't believe that particular matter raised by Councillor Gower would be a concern.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any participants, so unless somebody else sees somebody waving. We have before us the development charge complaint motion that Vice Chair Gower put on the table for us on behalf of Councillor Deans. The Planning Committee recommend the council sustain the development charge complaint. So support the development charge complaint that was brought to us. in respect of 1325 Johnston Road and direct that the municipal development charges paid be reimbursed. So we'll do yays and nays again on that. Okay, so this is on the motion from Councillor Deans, in effect. Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower.
Yeah.
And myself, yes. Did I cover everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 7-2. So on the development charge complaint, 1325 Johnson Road as amended, carried? With 2 dissents, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Councillor Deans.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so now that's our last item. Not bad considering we deferred 2 of them to the next time, so it'll be something that could potentially bite us in the you-know-what. So we're on to inquiries, and we do have one from Councillor Hubley. Your mute's on, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a brief inquiry. It's on the neighborhood study, Madam Chair. In particular, my inquiry, what I'm trying to get at here is 4 points. 1, whether any tax dollars have been contributed to the study by the City of Ottawa, whether we're paying to use it or did we contribute to create it. 2, how are city staff across the city, not just in planning, but across the city using this report? 3, how do we validate the information that's included in the findings? And finally, 4, can we suspend the use of the study until we can be sure that a reasonable effort is being made to validate the findings of the study? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else have an inquiry? Okay. Other business, other than the marathon coming up, sometime on Friday, the report will be released. And this is on the urban expansion study. And then the meetings are Monday, the 25th, the 26th, and the 28th, if necessary. And I guess if we needed to go longer than that, we would. We'll take as long as we need, as always, right? But at the beginning, we're going to define, when we're going to stop. We're going to start the meetings at 9 as opposed to 9:30, right? Yes, Councillor Brockington?
Are the number of days being held just because we think there's going to be so many delegations?
Yes, it's not that we have a massive list at this point. We do have some delegations that have signed up, but let's face it. Oh, Councillor Leeper, just a second. Let's face it. People will want to read the report before they decide what they're going to say, or or who they are going to say it with. So that's why we don't know, but we're erring on the side of caution. So use your one trip to the grocery store and stock up well. Anyway, that's it, I think. So other business? No, that's nothing else. And then adjournment. So we'll see you a week from Monday. Thanks very much for your attention. As always, goodbye, Councillor Leeper. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melody.